All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second commission meeting of 2021. I know that each of us would prefer to be in person. It's been a long time, but it really is great to get together today in this virtual format. The past year has taught us about the benefits of technology, and it's demonstrated the justice system's resilience and the work of every judge in the state of Texas to ensure that our citizens continue to have access to the courts and to the vital services. So thank you to everyone on this Zoom meeting for your efforts and for your leadership. We are truly encouraged by your engagement and your participation with the Children's Commission, and especially in your own communities and the leadership that you demonstrate in your own court systems. We know each of us is well aware that Texas courts are leading the nation in embracing virtual hearings and especially cognizant of the opportunities the virtual hearings bring for increased participation and engagement. So again, I'm proud, I'm grateful for your leadership. I hope that our September meeting will be in person. We know that CDC has just issued new guidance, and so we will plan on an in-person meeting for September unless something changes. So I hope that you'll put that on your calendars. So today, as we gather virtually, brings another opportunity to learn about the critical work happening across our state, in our child welfare, and in our legal systems. Before our updates, I have a few housekeeping matters to share. So to accommodate the virtual format, the meeting will end no later than 1 p.m. So we will not take any breaks. Please remain on mute unless you are speaking. I know all of us have heard dogs and lawnmowers and all sorts of things in the background. So if you can, please be mindful of staying on mute. If you step away, if you will turn off your video, that does help with, having, I don't know, maybe a cat appear on the video. Committee and collaborative council members are participating in listen-only mode, and we're broadcasting this meeting live on YouTube. The question and answer function is available, and our staff will monitor that function so that we can get to those questions. To comply with our grant requirements, commission staff will distribute an electronic match form after the conclusion of the meeting. And thank you again for helping us make the meeting as seamless as possible. And I hope that you noted we have a different format today. Our commissioner updates have been moved to the second half of our meeting. And we will start with the DFPS CPS updates, the OCA updates, and the JIR updates, as well as updates from the commission staff. We're not moving things around just to move them around. We really think that this format will facilitate discussion and dialogue as we receive these important updates. So Trevor Woodruff is here. And Trevor, welcome this morning. We're glad to have you here and look forward to your update. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Justice. Good morning, everybody. Deneen, Commissioner Masters send their apologies. Unfortunately, we were double booked this morning with our council meeting. So hopefully they'll be able to jump on later, but I'll certainly be updating them and glad to see everybody. Couple things to go over for our updates, and Justice, I think that's a great idea because I'm sure that what we're going to go over here will probably spur some discussion later. We, of course, are getting close to the end of session. I think if my count is right, we're about 16 days out, or maybe that's wishful thinking. But I do have to say that the members have done an excellent job, in my opinion, of dealing with the session during this pandemic. And they've been able to accomplish a tremendous amount. So there, of course, are a number of bills that we're watching very closely that will have significant impact on the agency and the way that we do business. So we are watching those, and we'll be prepared to implement those in the event that they pass. I'll take a minute and mention our budget. We had an opportunity to visit with the conference committees. They've asked some questions over this past weekend. I think they've been very hard at work. The House and the Senate were a little bit apart on a couple items. There was some separation on some monies we need for purchase client services and the services we offer families. There was a difference in our request for additional residential investigators that was tied to the federal lawsuit. There's a difference in that. There's also quite a significant difference between the House and the Senate original versions as to community-based care and that rollout. So I'm quite certain that there's been lots of discussion between the House and the Senate, and we're looking forward to seeing their final decisions and then implementing those and moving forward. There's been a tremendous amount of discussion here recently in the media around capacity and children in offices. And I know that each of you, as being part of the system, is impacted in one way or another. And so we have a number of things going to try to address those capacity issues. The commissioner, I think, has made clear that we're hopeful that there will be a rate increase from the legislature. I know money's exceedingly tight, but we think that will go a long way to helping the capacity issues. We have a number of work groups directly with providers to try to find out what we can do as DFPS to affect the capacity issues and address those. You know, heightened monitoring in the lawsuit has had a significant impact. I think Judge Jack has been very clear that the purpose of heightened monitoring is to raise the bar and keep children safe. I think providers are struggling with how it's being implemented and what it's going to mean. And so we're sitting down with them. We don't have much wiggle room at all, really, in how it's implemented or how it's performed, but we certainly want their feedback and to make that process as painless as possible on providers to encourage them to continue to accept some of our high acuity children. Another item that's been in the news here recently is family tapestry and community-based care in 8A. Unfortunately, that contract has ended. I think both DFPS and Family Tapestry put a lot into that contract, put a lot of work into it. Unfortunately, it was just not sustainable in its current state. So Family Tapestry has given notice that they no longer will be serving as the single source continuum contractor for Bexar County and the Region 8A area. We've been working very closely with Family Tapestry to resume services. We're looking right now at around about a 60-day process, maybe a little longer. Both sides are very committed to making sure that kids are not uprooted, that things are seamless for children and families in the system, so that we can do the best job we can to take this back over. And of course, where we go next with reprocurement will depend, I think, in large part on what direction we get from the legislature in the appropriations process. You know, I don't know that a lot of folks understand that the rollout of community-based care is very directly tied to the appropriations process. And so we will need to get our direction from the legislature on that rollout. Those are really the big things we have now. And so, Justice, you know, I thought maybe we could turn that over, and then as we go forward, I'll certainly be on, and any other discussions or questions, I'll be happy to cover then.
Okay, so in terms of format, I asked Trevor to go first before we talk about the commission changes and whatnot, because he is filling in, and we're going to return back to the agenda at this point. But if you have questions for Trevor, I know we're all concerned with respect to some of the things you mentioned, Trevor. So this would be an appropriate time for the commissioners to, you know, pose any questions to Trevor Woodruff and give him an opportunity to respond, or you can, how long will you be with us, Trevor? I was under the impression you may not be here for the whole meeting, but will you be here?
Yes, Justice, I'm planning to stay for the entire meeting.
Okay, good. All right, so we can come back to some of those questions, or we can address them now. Go ahead, please. If you have a question, just unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Katie Oles with the Texas Alliance of Child and Family Services, and I don't have a question. I just want to acknowledge Trevor and the commissioner and the department. These, the work groups he mentioned, it is all hands on deck to try to address the capacity needs. We are actively participating in all 5 of the work groups and have providers from all across the state actively participating, and it's just been really, really good hard work happening. And so I just want to acknowledge that it is just great to see the real partnership happening. So thank you. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you, Katie. Anyone else? All right. Well, I did see Ann Helgenstein. Let me see.
Thank you, Justice.
There you are. I see your hand now. There you go.
Thanks, Justice. And Trevor, I have to resonate what Katie just said. There have been a lot of sessions. None of them are easy, but this one has been exceptionally challenging. To have the dual activities of the lawsuit and doing your best to address that with providers as well as the session. But I do have a specific question. At this point in conference committee, can you share with us, or if that's information is public, as to the differences in CBC rollout between the House and the Senate and where they stand right now, the latest update?
Sure. I don't have anything more than what I can share because I don't have any latest updates. As of the time we went into conference committee, the House was not planning any further rollout of community-based care. So it would stay as stage 1 and 8A and stay in stage 2 in regions 3B and 2 and stage 1 and 1. And then I can't remember off the top of my head if it rolled out into 8B. I think it did because we plan to do that this biennium, was roll out into 8B. The Senate, however, had us moving to stage 2 in regions 1 and 8A, and then I think eventually into stage 2 and 8B. So I can have somebody in finance much smarter than me double check all that, but that's my recollection. So essentially, the House held a status quo and the Senate had us pushing forward to continue the rollout. We had also asked in our exceptional items to expand into regions 4 and 5 and 9, which would be East Texas and the Midland area. The House did not adopt the expansion of those, whereas the Senate did. So the Senate wanted to move very aggressively with continuing community-based care across the state. At that point, were the rollout to go into 4, 5, and 9, I think would be somewhere about 50% of the children in the state or more in community-based care. The House did not go with rolling out 4, 5, and 9 or moving to stage 2 in 2 or 1. So there's quite a gulf there. But I'm sure the conferees, they had lots of really good questions. I know they're working very hard. And so we're excited to see where we will go.
Thanks,
Sure. Our request, of course, was to continue the rollout and to move into 4, 5, and 9 into stage 2. Also, Justice, if I may take just 30 seconds, Ann, you mentioned the lawsuit. We did have a hearing recently. I think the hearing went quite well. The Commissioner Masters has a very good track to comply with Judge Jack's order. I think Judge Jack recognizes that and appreciates the work that the Commissioner is doing. And after 10 years on this lawsuit, this was the most positive hearing that I've been a part of. I have to think, though, even though it's positive on DFPS, it sometimes is not as positive for our other stakeholders like providers. And so, I don't want to have a love fest here, but Katie, I really do appreciate your help with the providers and all the work they're doing. And so what we really want to do, in addition to comply with the court's order, is to really shine a light on the fact that the providers are actually doing really good work, that they're trying to raise the bar themselves and support each other, because this is a child welfare system. And while the lawsuit is directed at the governor, DFPS, and HHSC to be truly effective in raising the bar and really, quite frankly, lifting the court's orders, it's going to take the entire child welfare system. So, I do appreciate very much the help you give, Katie, and of course, Justice, the help that you and Jamie give as well, and the judges here, because it's going to take all of us to move out of this compliance phase of the lawsuit.
Trevor, I have a question too. I know you had mentioned increasing the rates, which is a way to assist providers in being able to remain in business and provide services to children as a means to not reduce any more capacity. I'm wondering, right now we're in a situation where we have to be reactionary. I'm curious about proactive strategies to plan and forecast needs in the future to prevent this from happening again. And I'm not sure if you can share any strategies right now that you're thinking about that are creative or innovative, things maybe that haven't been done before, to try to address not only the urgent needs, but also planning for the future.
I think that's an excellent question, Luann. We of course still have our placement needs capacity report that's produced yearly. But I think we're growing on that. That's an excellent point. You know, where we sit now, there is capacity in the system that is not being utilized. It used to be that we didn't have the right type capacity. We needed, you know, higher acuity capacity. We certainly need that. But now, because of the confluence of events, we have providers who are reluctant to take some of these high acuity children. So there are empty beds, but the providers, for one reason or another, are not accepting them. I don't think that's because the providers don't want to serve kids. I think that's absolutely inaccurate. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I think there's a lot of concern about things. And so one overall, I don't the right word, a strategy, but the department really needs to do some education and support providers to help them understand where we are now, the new normal, if you will. That's a big part of it. And that way we can begin to tap that unused capacity. We need to continue to lean on our placement report, our needs assessment, but also the SSCCs themselves are doing some really exciting things that I think the agency can leverage on as far as recruitment. We've expanded the range for treatment foster care that may go into statute. So hopefully we can get some older children into more home-like settings. And so there are a number of things we're doing to grow. But the biggest, our immediate goal is to free up some of the unused capacity we have right now.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say, good morning, Trevor. I'm
Morning.
Judge Angela Grace Harrington in Harris County.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm just happy to hear today that there's something that's being done to immediately address this capacity issue, because I cannot tell you the level of heartbreak that I felt this past week. And it's just unbelievable to see what's happening with these children. They're placed at CWAPs and they're just free to roam and disappear. And a child that I met with last week, we can't even find him now. It's very heartbreaking. So I know that the committees are great and coming up with long-term goals and plans are wonderful, but we have to do something immediately to address this capacity issue, or the lawsuit that the state faced before is nothing compared to what will come down the pipeline with these children. We are at a stage critical level with CWAP placements. So just thank you for letting us know, giving us an update to let us know that there is something that's being done to immediately address the capacity issue.
Thank you, Judge. I think you're absolutely right. It is at critical levels. And it really is all hands on deck at DFPS. The commissioner is pulling CWAP shifts. I went to San Antonio Saturday night and worked the midnight to 4 a.m. shift, the entire executive team. I think, Judge, to your point, I think it's very important that the leadership of the agency knows what the frontline staff is facing, knows what these kids are facing. And so we have a very, very deep understanding of the impact it's having. And that's why the commissioner has us working every front we can to improve the situation.
Okay, and just to be very clear, I can tell you that I have one child that walks the street at night because she feels safer on the street than she does sleeping at CWAP. So she walks the street at night and she sleeps during the day when there's more staff at the facility because she doesn't feel safe at all. So she took a nap in my office because that's just how insane this has become.
That's entirely unacceptable. You know, we have 2 workers to every child, but we've expanded and we're starting to add law enforcement where necessary to ensure children's safety or the safety of others around some of the children with violent behaviors. But, you know, Judge, offline, I certainly would like to know the name of that child so I can personally look into that and make sure we get that fixed immediately.
All right, thank
you.
you for those comments.
Can I ask?
Okay. Do we have someone else?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, of course. Yes,
Trevor,
please.
I was just going to ask, have you all looked into possibly changing the standards for family members to have these children in their care? Because I know that sometimes the standards that the state requires kind of deters family members from even attempting to care for them. But if we can lift some of those standards, nothing that involves safety, obviously, could we look into that and maybe be able to place these families quicker so that they are children quicker so that we're not dealing with this problem on this greater scale?
So I think that's a great point. We have very liberal standards on placing children with relatives for just that reason. Kids should be with their relatives. And so there are very, very few bars or instances in which we don't place children with relatives. But I think you make a good point. There's absolutely never a bad time to go back and reevaluate where you are and see if there's something better you can do. So we'd be certainly happy to add that to the list just to make sure that that's calibrated where it should be.
Thank you, Ms. Bibb Samuels. That's a great point. And thank you to everyone who participated in this dialogue. I think Trevor mentioned the importance of every stakeholder, especially our judges, being very proactive in helping to pose solutions to individual cases. I know that DFPS always been there to take calls from the judges. So certainly if you have a particular case, Trevor, are the judges able to call and try to get some assistance with placements? That's been my experience in the past. Is that still?
Absolutely, Justice. You know, we have folks, their entire job is to find placements, and they work that job day and night, weekends as well. But if there's ever some kind of roadblock, absolutely, we're always available to judges anywhere to do whatever we can. And sometimes we're able to assist. And if not, then we will certainly do everything we can to make the situation as good as it can be.
Thank you. And we know no child enters or exits the system without a judge. So our judges are the front line. We thank you for the engagement today and hope that together we can work collaboratively to improve this situation. So Trevor will be around for the rest of the meeting if you have further questions or comments. And now if you will turn to tab 1, we're going to go back to the agenda and skip around a little bit. And so tab 1 is commission changes membership. And that's in your meeting notebook on page 9. The document includes commission, committee, and collaborative council membership, as well as staff. I'm going to highlight a few changes, and I'm going to begin with a very positive change that I'm very excited about. Because our folks are moving up and serving in an even greater capacity. So I'm pleased to announce that Judge Gary Coley has accepted our invitation to be the Children's Commission's new vice chair. So congratulations to Judge Coley. And we know that, there we go, virtual clap. The vice chair position was previously held by Judge Piper McCraw. And as you know, she is our newest jurist in residence. And so congratulations again to Judge McCraw. And thank you. Unlike jurists in residence who are not sitting judges, Judge McCraw cannot be paid. So this is all extra and volunteer. And it just reflects that deep commitment to improving our child welfare system. So thank you, and thank you, Judge Cooley, for your ongoing service and leadership. We're very happy about that. And so then I'll move on to a few more changes. And Tanya Rollins is retiring from DFPS at the end of the month, and she's going to pursue a PhD degree. So we're super excited for her. She will come off the statewide collaborative on trauma-informed care, training and systems improvement committees also. Ms. Rollins will stay involved through the Commission's Equity Group and the Collaborative Council. So congratulations again to Tanya Rollins for continuing to pursue her dreams. Jesse Boer is no longer on the Data Committee as he has accepted a new position with the DePelton Children's Center. Fantastic news for Jesse also. Jane Burstein will also leave the Data Committee as she is retiring from the department this month. And we are grateful to all three for their service and their invaluable contributions to the Commission's work. Regarding new committee members, Ana Saldana Ford will now represent DFPS on the Training Committee. Ms. Ford is a longtime partner with the Children's Commission, and we are grateful for her participation in this committee. Dr. Jangmin Kim is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at Texas State University, and he joins our Data Committee. His areas of research include child welfare practice and administration, such as family meeting models, workforce development, supervision, and public-private partnerships. So we look forward to our own new partnership with Dr. Kim. I'm also pleased to announce that Judge Randy Hufstedler, Randall, it says Randall, but I know the judge is Randy. He is a longtime friend. Judge Hufstedler is the new chair of the Legal Practice and Process Committee. So thank you so much for your leadership, Judge, and thank you for your work in improving legal practice in process. Now, continuing with collaborative council member changes under tab 1. Deborah Emerson is retiring from DFPS and will transition off the Collaborative Council. She has been an integral member of several commission initiatives, including those focused on higher education, older youth in care, and dual status youth. We are very grateful for the many years of partnership with Ms. Emerson and thank her for her service. Sadie Funk has left First 3 years, and her place on the council is now filled by Stephanie Madrigal. First 3 years is an advocacy group that supports parents and caregivers who have children aged 0 to 3 years old. Welcome, Stephanie. And collaborative council members were asked to submit written updates or request to speak in advance. So during that section of the agenda, those members who requested to speak will be called on to give updates. As always, thank you to our collaborative council for your invaluable input and for partnering with us. Thank you. There are no staff member changes, so we're happy about that. Now we move on to tab 2, the minutes from the February 26, 2021 meeting. They were distributed in advance and they're behind tab 2, page 13 in your PDF notebook. We will assemble the votes verbally. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? Yes. Are there any corrections?
Hi, this is Gary Blau. I'd like to just make a minor correction on the section. It said that where the Trauma and Grief Center is at the Texas Children's Hospital, and but it needs to say that it's not, the Hackett Center is now the new home to the Trauma and Grief Center. They are no longer at the Texas Children's Hospital.
All right, the correction has been noted. Is there any objection to the correction? Do we, does anyone have, all right, I've just asked that. So the correction will be adopted, hearing no objection to the correction. Do I have a motion to adopt the meetings as corrected?
So moved.
And let the record reflect that the motion came from Judge Mireles. The motion to adopt, I couldn't see.
Justice Byrne and Ms. Briggs.
Okay, so the motion was to adopt by Chief Justice Darlene Byrne and a second by Vicky Briggs. All in favor, raise your hand on the screen, please. All right, any opposed? The minutes are adopted. All right, and we have the Office of Court Administration coming on right at 10. And I know David Slayton is very, very busy with the legislative session. So I don't want to necessarily start something else because we do need to take David Slayton right at 10. And I don't think he's on the call yet. But let's see.
Justice Guzman, there is one more question for Trevor in the Q&A. Maybe we could take that up while we're waiting for David. Would that be all right?
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just read it out loud. It said, do we foresee the re-procurement in Region 8A affecting other areas, either active counties or counties planning for CBC? Could this be a shared learning opportunity to understand how we can be proactive in other counties?
So absolutely, it's an opportunity for shared learning. You know, we certainly didn't want this to happen, but now that it has, we need to make sure that we don't repeat any missteps. And we can, I think, from the procurement through the entire process, I think there are things we can learn that we can improve on. I don't know that will impact other areas. Again, we'll see if the legislature what the appropriations process says. We would like to go back and re-procure it. I don't know if the area would change. It may stay the same. But we've had lots and lots of discussions in the PPP, Judge Hoffman, others, about whether catchment areas are right, et cetera. And the commissioner, of course, nothing's set in stone with her. We're going to do what's right. So at this point, that's a big, I don't know. The easy answer is we'd love to go back out, re-procure 8A, keep it where it is and keep it moving. But there may be some changes, particularly depending on appropriations.
Thank you for that answer. Any follow-up on that question? Okay, then we are going to just stand by for David Slayton. Let me know when he joins. I was going to ask Judge Ferguson if you thought you needed to copyright that cat. I saw that they're making cookies out of I'm Not a Cat and all sorts of things.
It is everywhere all the time, Justice Guzman. You can't escape it. Yesterday on Twitter, I think it was Judge Miskell and one other judge who sent pictures of cookies that were given to deans of some of the law schools by their students. So. And I have to admit, I have gotten a few T-shirts in the mail from people asking me to sign them, which I have been happy to do and send them back. So,
oh, that's funny. All right. Well, I see that the man of the hour has joined us, David Slayton from the Office of Court Administration. We're grateful, David, for your participation, and we are ready when you are.
Thank you very much, Justice Guzman, and good morning, commissioners. Thanks for, and collaborative council members, thanks for letting me hop in. It is, as you know, crazy times right now, specifically on the legislative front, with us trying to, as I tell everyone, trying to land a few airplanes on moving ships. Just want to give you a couple of updates on maybe a few things. I know Jamie may have already updated on you on some of these or will throughout the day. One of the things that we are working on that's not related to legislation is trying to figure out the best way to enable courts to continue to be able to have hybrid remote hearings. And the commission has been helpful in that so far, and we're going to continue to work with the commission. As any of you who are judges know, fully remote or fully in-person hearings seem to work really well. Hybrid hearings are more difficult to administer. So it's really a technology problem. And so we're trying to work with several of our child protection courts to sort of demonstrate how to best do that, and then be able to use what we learn there to put out information to other judges on how to most effectively do that. So stay tuned for more on that. I think we have a request before you on that. So we're hopeful to work with you all going forward on that. The other thing that's, I'll switch now to the legislative front. We are working on several things, one of which it comes straight from the work of the commission's task forces, specifically the dual status task force. There is legislation that would better define, or actually define in statute, dual status and dually involved. As you all know who worked on that, statute is silent to that, and sometimes there can be some questions to what that means. And so that information, those definitions were included in House Bill 3774, which is the Omnibus Courts Creation Bill, a bill that typically passes every session and is certainly moving through the legislature this time. But that will hopefully provide some clarity on top of the work that the commission has done on dual status and dually involved youth. So we're really excited about that as well. Also in House Bill 3774 is language which would authorize courts to continue doing remote hearings, notwithstanding any other statute that prohibits it within certain parameters. Most importantly, those parameters as it applies to civil and CPS cases would be that the parties have a right to object to a remote proceeding, and that courts must grant those objections and permit an in-person hearing for good cause shown. So that language is in, again, House Bill 3774 is moving through the system. Anyone who has read that language, you may have a few changes that you want to that. Other people have indicated a few minor things. For instance, the definition of remote proceeding requires it be through the internet. So does that exclude telephone? So we're working on that. But if you have suggestions or questions on that, let me know. Some of you may also know that there's been some resistance to remote proceedings in the Senate. The Senate State Affairs Committee heard the remote hearings bill a few weeks ago. Senator Hughes, who's the chair of that committee, has indicated some concerns with doing things remotely. And so we continue to work with the Senate on that, especially since that language is now over in their court. So stay tuned for more on that. One thing to note, though, is even if the bill does not pass, that does not mean that judges can't do remote hearings. It's just that there may be some statutory barriers in some hearings to those being done remotely. And our Supreme Court's remote hearings task force has identified a number of those. So we're still hopeful the legislature will pass that statute that we've proposed, but that's still underway. On the budget front, I know this isn't directly on the commission side, but on the budget front, we're still working, and the Supreme Court has been working very hard to ensure increased funding for access to justice. The Supreme Court asked for $8 million over the biennium. And so these House put in $4 million, the Senate put in $0. And so we're still working to try to increase that number to provide increased access to justice generally. That's moving along. One piece of good news, though, on the access to justice front, yesterday, the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs approved up to $20 million in funding for access to justice, specifically for rent-related issues, which obviously can affect families that are involved with you all. And so that's really a very positive thing. And that goes hand in hand with another really incredible thing that the Supreme Court did several months ago, which is the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. I don't think I've spoken to you about that, but I'll take just a second here to highlight that, especially for those of you that deal with families that are struggling with rent-related issues. Through the Supreme Court's leadership and working with Governor Abbott and the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, over $1 billion has been set aside for rent relief through TexasRentRelief.com. That is the primary place to refer people. That is rent relief that can be provided before an eviction. But if they go to an eviction and the case gets before a judge, the Supreme Court requires all justices of the peace or constitutional county judges, if it gets appealed, or county court law judges if it gets appealed, to discuss with the landlord and tenant the availability of this program and this funding. And if the landlord and tenant are interested, then the referral occurs. And the program allows paying 100% back rent, back utilities, if those are included in the lease. It's a really great program. So I hope if you all are working with families who are struggling, that you can send them to TexasRentRelief.com. There was a little bit of an issue early on with that getting off the ground with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs processing applications. As you can imagine, there were a lot, but that pace has picked up. If you go to TexasRentRelief.com right now, at the very top of the page, there's actually a dashboard that shows how much money has been put out and how many households have been helped. And then if you look in the top left corner of that secondary page, you can actually drill that down to Texas Eviction Diversion Program funding, and even drill it down to counties and zip code. So you can actually see how many people have been helped in your local communities. It is a now being nationally touted program. I was actually on a call yesterday, and some researchers had done some research, and they were just touting Texas's efforts. So I applaud the Supreme Court, the governor, and TDHCA for their leadership in setting up that program. It has helped thousands of households at this point, and will likely continue to help more as we go forward. So that's primarily my update, Justice Guzman, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
All right, thank you for that update. Questions from our commissioners? And David is a wealth of knowledge. If you have a question on anything that's going on, wealth of information, yeah.
Looks like I get off easy today, Justice Guzman.
I think so. Thank you again, David, for the update. The only thing I was going to ask, and I guess Dylan, you might have this, an update in writing that we could send to the commissioners on, the bills that you just covered, so that we could, follow along if anyone's interested, if that might be helpful. Okay.
We'll make sure. I'll work with Dylan if he doesn't already have it. We'll make sure and get that to everyone.
All right.
I'm happy to work with David, and we'll make sure we get to the people who are interested.
Right. We'll give it to the commissioners, and that way they could follow along. Thanks again, David. Have a great day.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Great. So we are right on schedule and moving right along. And so we now have our jurist in residence report. Our senior jurist in residence, Judge Hoffman, will begin, and followed by Judge Piper McCraw.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. Good morning, everyone. Like everyone else, it's been a very busy spring. We finished a jury trial here in Mason County earlier this week, but I'll give you a report on what's been going on since our last meeting. On the day of our last meeting, February 26th, I was able to attend virtually the National Center for State Courts Rural Justice Collaborative. I've been appointed to their advisory council, and I'm really excited about that. And one of their 7 focus areas is reducing the number of children in foster care across the nation. So I'm excited to work on that. Later in April, I presented on their behalf at the State Justice Initiative Board of Directors meeting. And then on behalf of the Children's Commission at the Oklahoma Administrative Office of Courts Juvenile Justice Committee meeting in April as well. Like Trevor mentioned, there's a lot going on with community-based care, a lot of work going on over at the PPP to follow up on. I think I mentioned last time that I was going to be able to testify before the House Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee first meeting. I was very honored to do that. And then later on in March, extremely honored to get to introduce Chief Justice Hecht at the NCJFCJ National Conference on Juvenile Justice. So that was fun. We've wrapped things up with the Supreme Court Remote Proceedings Task Force. I think we're in a holding pattern waiting for further direction from the court there. Of course, we had a great Judicial Trauma Institute. I know that Milbury and her crew are to be commended for that, and she'll probably mention that moving forward. We're, of course, planning for the Child Protection Court Conference, as well as the Child Welfare Judges Conference later on. And we're also planning to have a judicial webcast on capacity. I know we'll hear about that more to follow up on what Trevor was talking about as well. Let's see. I think besides that, I just wanted to mention that there are, of course, work continues on all of our work groups for our bench books, equity, human trafficking, a lot of work going on. And to follow up, I think on capacity, I appreciate Judge Graves Harrington speaking to us about the concern that she had there. One of my kids here from my district is actually on a plane today, flying to the Miami area to be placed for an outside contract because we don't have the capacity here in Texas, separating her by 1,000 miles or more from her siblings who are also in care. So we're looking forward to seeing the work that we can get done on that. Finally, I would just say that there's been a lot of work, of course, going on with proposed legislation. Dylan and Jamie and everyone has been working hard on that, as well as white papers. And also we're getting some work done with regards to the Supreme Court emergency orders, maybe some more interim orders, but also a final order that's forthcoming as well. So lots of work going on and lots of directions. Thank you, Justice Guzman. That's everything for me.
Judge McCraw.
Yes, thank you. And I think Judge Hoffman covered a lot of, I guess, what's been going on with the state stuff. Just on my end, I did want to say a huge thank you to all of you on here that helped out with the Judicial Trauma Institute. I had an opportunity to participate in that. I know Judge Hoffman, Judge Alvarado, Justice Byrne. It was an incredible conference, and a lot about more of the trauma informed care and the trauma-based care. And that's something that we're planning to try to roll out in our county and try to get some more training going on for that. So it was, I think, really really helpful, especially hearing from some of the teens that had been in care, hearing how some of the other judges have implemented, but it really helped kind of lead the way for how to get it going in our county, not so much of just the theoretical approach, but how do we actually get it moving. So I was really thankful to be able to participate in that. And so hopefully we'll be getting back to in-person soon. I think we're all just kind of waiting to see where we're going from here with all the new CDC guidelines and kind of seeing what everybody else is going to do from that. So that's about it on my end. I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or discussion for our Jersey residents? All right, hearing none, we will move on to tab 3 in your PDF notebooks, and that's the Executive Director Report and project updates. And so I'll turn it over to Jamie Bernstein.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. Well, as has already been mentioned, in the past 3 months since we last met, there have been many changes that have occurred throughout our state. As the legislative session draws to a close, we can certainly expect to see significant changes in the Child Welfare Agency and the court process in CPS cases. With the numbers of children without placement on the increase, we are planning a judicial discussion to address capacity needs in June. That was already mentioned by Judge Hoffman. He will be moderating that discussion for us. And we're very excited that Associate Commissioner Deneen Dryden, Katie Olds, Linda Garcia from To Engage, as well as our very own Tina Amberboy, will do a panel discussion, and then we'll have a moderated discussion with the judges afterwards to kind of discuss some strategies on how we can address this capacity issue. Of course, we have community-based care, the federal lawsuit, COVID-19, and other factors impacting child welfare right now as well. While the system is very fragile, I have to say I'm very reassured by the strong judicial leadership that we have in our state and our shared commitment to collaborating with one another to meet our joint vision of strengthening the system together. Our team at the Children's Commission has been very hard at work, and we have a lot of information that we want to share with you today. So as Justice Guzman mentioned, we have our commission report that really details all of our strategies. We will not be going into great detail into all of them. We're going to give you the high level overview and the oversight of just what we've done in the past few months. We've also recently completed several big reports, and these will be discussed and embedded within the context of the committees and the work that we do. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Amy, who's going to kick off our systems improvement, and we'll go by committee and talk about these reports and updates. And then at the end, we'll talk about the supplemental funding, and we will have a voting matter for your consideration. So Amy?
Good morning, everyone. I just want to start off by talking about our newest work group, which is the Human Trafficking Work Group. It is in full swing, and you'll actually hear from our chair, Judge Morales, a little bit later on its progress. In education, the Commission recently released some guidance on the COVID-19 stimulus package and its impact on older foster youth and transitions. You'll actually hear from Sarah Worthington from the Texas Foster Youth Justice Project later this meeting, and she'll be able to give you a lot more details on that. Lastly, prevention projects are still in the development stage, but it is very much on the forefront of our future planning. So we're looking forward to that work group really expanding or establishing a work group and just kind of moving forward. And so it is my pleasure to turn this over to Jocelyn.
Thanks, Amy. So first, I want to say that the statewide collaborative on trauma-informed care has been very active this past year. And as reported in our February Commission report, we are excited to have a traumainformedtexas.com landing page to begin populating that page with work from the SCTIC resources for the community. And actually, Jessica, if you'll go to the next slide, that'll give you guys there you go. That's the front page. That's one of my favorite pictures from the Blueprint report. You can use that URL and get to the landing page. We have currently, there are audience-specific training resources that the training work group created, and we'll soon have organizational assessment one-pagers available. So stay tuned and check back often. As I've received the gracious words from Judge Macron, Judge Hoffman, I am also very excited to report that after 2 postponements due to COVID-19 and Winter Storm Uri, the Judicial Trauma Institute took place on April 22nd and 23rd. The 2-day event focused on training our court teams, but since we were virtual, we were able to open it up to SCTIC members, some of our Children's Commission work group members, and any judge that was registered with the Texas Center for Judiciary. We had a total of 240 people registered for the inaugural JTI, and this included judges outside of child welfare whose dockets included family law, juvenile justice, and criminal matters. So we were reaching beyond child welfare, which is amazing. All 8 sessions were fantastic in their own right, but they did also build upon each other in a manner that I hope court teams benefited from as they begin or continue to implement their trauma-informed practices in their courts. The post-evaluations have been overwhelmingly positive, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can continue supporting teams through data projects and other needs. And the recordings are available on TCJ's online conference site, Brightspace Now, for those who registered for the event. And any judge who's in TCJ's system, I believe you can go, if you haven't already registered, I think you can go and register and watch all of the recordings and get all the materials. And we're also working on putting those materials on the Commission's website so that it will be publicly accessible. I am so grateful to each of our speakers, panelists, moderators, and facilitators. I know there's very many of them on here as commissioners, as well as collaborative council members. And I appreciate all of you and the work you and the commitment to JTI. A special thanks, though, must be given to Justice Byrne for her unfaltering leadership of the SCTIC over the years and her insistence and assistance in keeping JTI a reality for a year. So thank you very much. And please check out traumainformedtexas.com. And now to Renee.
And thank you, Jocelyn. Actually, I'm going to hand it to Dylan really quick so that he can start our legal practice and process updates.
Thank you, Renee. The first thing I want to do is just thank Judge Huffstetler for agreeing to be our new LPP chair. We're very excited to have him on board and anticipate a really wonderful working relationship with him. I wanted to just briefly update on some of our projects that fall under legal process and practice. Of course, the Commission has our long-standing bench book that we update every year. This year, we have created a judicial work group to make sure that we get judicial feedback on how to update and improve the bench book going forward. We've already had 1 meeting of that work group. We'll have a 2nd meeting going forward, and the bench book will, of course, be available online and in print at the Child Welfare Judges Conference this fall. I also wanted to update a little bit on the work of the Legal Representation Committee. 2 projects specifically. We have our toolkit for attorneys representing parents and children that we published last year, and our toolkit for attorneys representing DFPS. We have decided to have a regular update process for each of those toolkits after each legislative session. So we'll have standing work groups that will review those toolkits, make updates after each legislative session with the goal of publishing new updated toolkits in the spring of the year following the legislative session. I also wanted to update everyone on our project that's working on creating materials to help children understand the attorney-client relationship. We have been working on several different projects that fall under that category, but I'm excited to let you know that our work on the coloring book dedicated for younger children has really moved forward. We identified an illustrator, an author who's helped us create that. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but we've got a plot outline, and it involves a judicially ordered visit with a puppy. So we're really excited about that and looking forward to that being completed. And I think that will probably be ready in time for fall of this year. I'm going to talk about standards of representation a little bit later when we update the task force report from the Legal Representation Task Force. But I want to let everyone know that the notice engagement tool, this is a tool that is available for courts that use the Child Protection Case Management System to allow people to sign up to get automatic text or email notification services. That's a tool that's been around for a long time for CPC courts, but we're really excited that Tarrant County has shown interest in adopting both the CPCMS system and the notice and engagement tool for a non-CPC court. So that's a really new, exciting development that should be rolled out in June. And our hope is that if other courts see that this can be successful, it's something that can be slowly expanded across other jurisdictions. I also wanted to let everyone know that we, of course, are continuing to track legislative issues. This has been a very big legislative session. I believe as of yesterday morning, there are currently 83 bills the commission is tracking that are still live, and that compares to, I think, 43 bills that passed the previous legislative session. And of course, a lot of the bills are more significant and are have more impactful changes than last session. So the commission will, of course, be doing our written legislative update that should be available in July, and we'll also be doing webcast, maybe more than one webcast on the legislative changes, depending on how many finally make it through. And I wanted to just thank our jurists and residents, Judge Hoffman and Judge McGraw. They've been wonderful in helping us develop our white papers and provide feedback on legislation. We really couldn't do without you. So I just wanted to highlight their hard work throughout this legislative session. And I will turn it back over to Renee to update on our work on parent resources.
Thank you, Dylan. Our parent resource group is currently working on a pre-litigation parent resource guide, which is created to assist Texas families with giving them information and resources on how to navigate through the early stages of a child welfare case, where it's less likely that they will be represented by an attorney. The Texas Family Helpline has really helped with providing that content for us. And there are a few sections of the guide that will require statutory edits based on the results of this legislative session. We anticipate that the finalized version of this guide will be completed by the fall. In addition to the great work the Family Helpline has done with providing content for this resource, they have completed 496 calls and provided assistance to 437 individual callers about child welfare legal issues across the state of Texas during their second quarter of this fiscal year. Calls have originated from 98 counties across the state and have also come from out of state regarding Texas child welfare issues. The top 3 topics of inquiry include investigations, temporary managing conservatorship issues, and FBSS. Top trending issues surround conservatorship, visitation, safety planning, parental child safety placements, and substance abuse. The helpline staff continues to take advantage of the ease and efficiency of watching virtual hearings across the state via the OCA YouTube feeds, and have been able to gain a better understanding of the legal process in various jurisdictions, which helps them to better inform their callers across the state. That brings us to our mediation work group now. Our work group is working on a draft of a virtual mediation toolkit aimed at providing current CPS mediators with guidance on hosting virtual CPS mediations. They anticipate that the toolkit will be completed by this fall and want to follow that up with a more robust toolkit for attorneys interested in mediating CPS cases. Their next work group meeting will be held on June 25th. And they, the main reason that our mediation work group has come to fruition finally is out of this mediation roundtable report that we have now available on our website. The commission had hosted a roundtable on mediation in child protection cases in February of 2019 with the goal of advancing ideas that would increase effectiveness for mediation as a tool for outcomes of children and families. As I said, our work group is tasked with analyzing issues that were identified at this roundtable. They will identify and address challenges and opportunities for virtual mediation and develop action items that will be implemented to raise the quality of mediation across the state. The full report, again, is available on our commission webpage and was issued out in February of 2021. This concludes my portion of this report, and I will turn it back over to Dylan for the task force on court-appointed legal representation report.
Thank you, Renee. So the task force on legal representation was something that came out of the study that the commission did in 2018 on legal representation that identified some deficiencies in how representation was working and functioning across the state of Texas. So we assembled a task force of judges and attorneys and policymakers and other stakeholders to try to analyze how Texas could think about changing the system of providing representation to parents and children to raise the quality of representation. This is also in response to some studies that showed the beneficial impact of quality representation, as well as some newly available federal funds that are available to counties to reimburse them for the cost of providing representation. So I want to thank all of the hard work of all of the task force members, particularly our commission members, Judge Huffstetler, Elizabeth Farley with the governor's office, our representative Click and her staff, as well as many members of our collaborative council worked very hard on this task force during the pandemic to make sure that we really identified important issues that are essential to raising the quality representation. And sort of the first issue that the task force was identified was developing standards of representation. Texas doesn't have Texas-specific standards of representation. The Family Code requires that attorneys be familiar with the ABA and NAC standards, but there are currently no Texas-specific standards of representation. And so when the task force examined this issue, they felt that setting out specific standards was a little bit outside of their mandate and their purview. So what they instead focused is kind of creating a guide for what standards in Texas need to address. And I think the committee really focused on the aspect of twofold of zealous advocacy, but also making sure that attorneys understand the population that they're serving in a trauma-informed way, that developing the attorney-client relationship is something that needs to take into account the special population of both parents and children that are involved in these cases. So the guide sort of sets out what these standards need to include specifically to raise the quality of representation in Texas. And like I said, it focuses on making sure that attorneys are vigilant and filing motions and responding to pleadings, but also that they're patient and understanding and develop meaningful attorney-client relationships that can be effective going forward. The next area that the task force examined was sort of what changes need to be made to the structure of the appointment system. So when we talk about appointed attorneys, how do we do that in a way that is consistent with quality representation? And sort of the first structure that the task force identified was providing multidisciplinary support and assistance for attorneys. We'll talk about some of the studies that the task force looked at a little bit later, but some of the studies really focused on the fact that having access to social workers or expert witnesses or investigators or parent mentors is a key aspect of providing quality representation, and also is associated with certain very tangible benefits from that quality representation. So the task force really felt that access to that multidisciplinary support is an essential element of improving the structure of representation. Another element of that structure is making sure that the system has good information about what attorneys are doing in terms of how many cases attorneys are handling, what actions they're actually performing as part of their regular duties, so that the evaluations can be made that take account into that information, so that attorney performance can be reviewed and sort of measured against some of the standards of representation. And then the final piece is that the compensation structure needs to sort of be aligned with the standards of representation, so that the way attorneys are paid aligns with the best practices to make sure that attorneys are complying with their duties in a way that provides effective representation. So after examining sort of the standards of representation and the structure of how those systems need to be aligned to provide quality representation, the task force next looked at models of representation. So we looked at different models that other states are using of providing representation in ways that are associated with high quality. And we looked at essentially sort of 4 basic models. The first is predominantly used in California, and it is a sort of a contract firm model. It's sort of similar to almost the structure of community-based care that's being rolled out, in that certain regions have contracts with a provider that it has flexibility in how they provide that representation. And that contract can be over a geographic area, it can be county specific, and it can overlap between counties. And then the method of oversight is really kind of the contract renewal. Does the state agency decide to renew the contract with that provider? The second model that we examined is the institutional office model. And this is a model that's heavily used in New York City, for example, where there are several different providers that have offices that have attorneys on staff, similar to a public defender office, and also access to multidisciplinary support such as social workers, investigators, and parent mentors. And these models are associated with quality representation, but obviously there's a lot of work that has to go into developing those institutional offices, and they are sort of a good fit for dense metropolitan areas, but are harder to achieve in rural jurisdictions where there may not be a concentration of resources and attorneys who are willing to provide that representation. We also looked at the oversight agency model, and this is a model that's sort of been pioneered in Colorado, where there's one agency that's statewide that takes on the responsibility for approving contracts with attorneys to provide representation and supervising those attorneys. So rather than having sort of a county by county wheel of attorneys who are approved, it's essentially one agency who's responsible for sort of a statewide wheel of eligible attorneys to take appointments. And then we also examined some systems that sort of had hybrid agencies that functioned in both ways. Massachusetts and North Dakota both have systems where there's an agency that functions both as an institutional office in some jurisdictions, but also functions as an oversight agency in other jurisdictions. And after examining all of the models, the task force really determined that there's no one model that's the right fit for Texas, but that Texas needs to start exploring pilots of different models to see how each of these models is effective in different areas of Texas. The task force also examined some studies of quality representation to try to get a sense of how achieving quality representation could have benefits for the state. The biggest study was from New York City, and this was on specifically these institutional office models that are in place there. And what that study found is that representation through that specific model reduced time to permanency by up to 4 months on average for cases. And obviously that has a large impact on the system if children spend up to 4 months less in care. Now, that study, it's hard to anticipate exactly how quality representation might affect Texas. We probably couldn't expect that level of reduction in time to permanency, but some reduction in time to permanency probably can be expected from raising the quality representation. We also examined studies in Washington State that revealed, again, a shortened time to permanency and also increase in rates of reunification to Texas. And if Texas does achieve some of this quality representation metrics, there are some significant benefits. If time to permanency is in fact shortened, there's a big financial reduction in the cost of providing foster care that comes with that. And the scale of money that is spent on legal representation versus the scale of money that's spent on foster care is pretty significant. The commission estimates that at least $56 million was spent on representation in 2017, but over $500 million was spent on foster care in this last fiscal year. So the scale of cost of each of these things is substantially different. But if we reduce the time that children spend in foster care, that can save a lot of money that can be made available to increase the quality representation. Another area of possible benefit of increasing the quality of representation is increasing reunifications. Texas does spend quite a bit of funds on subsidies, both for adoption and for permanent care assistance for families that are not reunified. So the more families that are successfully reunified, the less resources have to go to those particular options for non-reunified families. And it's also important to note that increasing the rate of reunification is something that's beneficial in and of itself. It reduces trauma on children and families and keeps families and children with their communities of origin. So there's non-financial benefits that come with raising the rates of reunification as well. And so after examining all these models, the task force specifically recommends that the state start examining some different pilots of trying out some of these different models. And they wanted to identify certain things that need to be a part of these pilots. And the first was state funding. So in addition to county funding, in addition to some of the federal Title E funds that are available, there needs to be some state funding to really raise the quality of representation. Because as the examination of that data shows, the benefits of quality representation really sort of accrue at the state level, particularly regarding funding for foster care and adoptions. So if the state wants to realize some of those benefits, then the state has to pick up some of the burden for improving that quality of representation. The next element was replicability, that these pilots need to be really focused on elements that can be identified, not just for working in a specific area, but how they can be replicated in different communities across Texas. And then the last area is really having these pilots targeted in areas of geographic diversity. Texas is a very complex and diverse state, so these model representation pilots should be put in places that cover the geographically diverse and demographically diverse areas of Texas. And so we're really hoping the legislature will act on these recommendations. Obviously, it's probably too late in this legislative session, but we're hoping in the biennium some work can go into looking at these pilots and developing some projects in time for the next legislative session. The task force also wanted to make sure that we recommended some short-term implementations of specific things that can be done to raise the quality of representation in the immediacy. The first that they identified was changing the attorney ad litem's reporting requirement from a written requirement that has to be filed with the court after a hearing takes place to affirm that the attorney has met with their client, to an oral reporting requirement that the attorney has to report to the court whether they have met with their client or whether or not they are requesting a good cause finding for not meeting with their client. And we're pleased to announce that that language actually was included in the bill that David Slayton mentioned earlier, 3774. So we're hopeful if that bill makes it through, that will be a new change that's part of this legislative session. The other recommendation was that attorneys for parents be appointed when the petition is filed. That was not a change that was implemented in this legislative session, but we're hopeful in the next legislative session that's a piece that can be moved forward. And then the final change that was recommended in the near term was changing the approach to utilizing Title IV funds. So the Federal Children's Bureau made an announcement several years ago that they are making Title IV funds eligible for providing representation to parents and children in addition to providing representation to the department. And what the task force recommends is that those funds be utilized in sort of a bottom-up way to increase the quality of representation. So it's encouraging jurisdictions to come up with a plan as to how they would use those funds to raise the quality of representation, submit that plan, and then once that plan is approved, then the funds can be released. So that's the approach that the task force is recommending, to utilize those Title IV funds to make sure that those funds are tied to quality metrics that will raise the quality of representation. And that's the best I can do to summarize this report that's 50 pages long in about 10 minutes, but it is now hot off the presses. It's available at the link you can see below. And we're really excited about it. And I just want to say that I think particularly some of the work on the standards of representation is something the commission's identified as an area of focus that we would like to develop a little more time and more researches on going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has, either now or via email later on if you have any. And I will turn it back over to Renee to update us on the training committee.
Thank you, Dylan. Currently, the Commission is working with the Training Director of the Texas District and County Attorneys Association and our Planning Committee to develop CLE content for attorneys representing the department on CPS issues. The content will be hosted on their TDCAA website and will be recorded in October of 2021. And the Commission will contract with TDCAA to provide access to the content for DFPS regional attorneys on a scholarship basis. We have our fall 2021 trial skills training that will take place on August 26th, 2021 and September 1st and 2nd. The application period for trial skills training closed on April 30th, and we had 75 people apply for the 21 slots that we have available for our second interactive virtual offering of the trial skills training. Our 21 attorneys that will be selected will be notified of their selection no later than June 4th. With regard to in-house webcasts, we have webcasts coming up on our legislative session. There will be 1 to 2 highlighting the laws that were passed in the 87th legislative session this July. And additionally, we are planning to create a brown bag lunch series of webcasts to provide legal professionals practicing child welfare law with free CLE content on issues of interest as indicated in post-event conference surveys. I will now turn it back over to Milby Rainey to discuss judicial trainings and opportunities.
Thank you, Renee. Hello, everyone. My updates are On judicial education, I wanted to highlight 3 things for you all this morning. One is the judicial discussion on capacity issues, which Jamie has already talked about. And after that, we'll have 2 conferences that we're currently planning. The first one is the Child Protection Court Convening. We'll do that in partnership with OCA. We put this on every other year. We invite 30 Child Protection Court judges and their court coordinators to join us. This will be held virtually on July 28th and 29th, and we'll be training on best practices and CPCMS updates. And following that, we'll have our annual Child Welfare Judges Conference. We do this in partnership with Texas Center for the Judiciary. And at this time, we're planning to have a safe and successful in-person conference at the Sheraton Georgetown on October 25th through 27th. This year, we'll have a pre-conference on child welfare essentials. We'll also train on how the new legislation will affect judges' daily work, and we'll partner with the department to host the very popular regional breakout sessions. Curriculum committees have met for both of these judicial conferences, and we're proceeding to lock in our agendas based on their recommendations. And now I'll turn it back over to Dylan for an update on the work of our data committee.
Thank you, Milbree. So I wanted to update you on a few of the projects underneath our data committee. The first is regarding the Child Protection Case Management System. We are working on a project to see if we can integrate the Child Protection Case Management System with DFPS's impact system. The Office of Court Administration and DFPS personnel have been working very hard to identify sort of information fields that are shared between the 2 systems that, if matched correctly, can make sure that the systems are talking about the same cases and can upload that information directly. So we've got that sort of information identified. And the next step is to have a sample information set to use this algorithm to see if it's successful. And we're working with a memorandum of understanding between OCA and the department to get that data set established so we can test and see if this data sharing system can be successful. Our judges who are part of that work group have also identified making sure that no information sharing constitutes possible ex parte communication between the department and the judge that's not available to other parties. And the judicial members of that work group are meeting to make sure that no ex parte issues are not addressed in any data sharing protocol. I also wanted to update that our data analyst, Jeff Cox, with the Texas Alliance of Child and Family Services, has been really helpful with the commission of making sure that our conferences are data informed. He presented last fall at our Child Welfare Judges Conference to give context to DFPS's data. He also presented at our recent Judicial Trauma Institute conference to help judges understand what data is available to help them implement some of the changes that can be made to make their courts more trauma informed. And also that he's available as a resource to help jurisdictions who are interested in implementing some of those changes. He's also working with our equity group to make sure that our equity work is data informed. And so we're really excited about having him be a more regular part of a lot of our work going forward. We're also working with the CPCMS Advisory Committee to make sure that the required fields in CPCMS reflect best practices and essential information that the court needs. And we're also working on a project analyzing the Houston and Dallas PMC courts, try to capture the good work that we know those courts are doing in serving that specialty population. I also just wanted to thank our equity advisor, Sheila Craig, for participating in our most recent data committee meeting and really helping our data committee members understand the importance of viewing data through an equity lens and understanding how those 2 very important fields relate to each other. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jamie to update us on the juvenile restraining panel, I believe.
Thanks, Dylan. I'm going to talk about the restraints in juvenile court report, and then I'll give a brief update about the dual status task force that David referred to earlier. The restraints in juvenile court discussion happened in August, but our report was completed earlier this year, and you can see the URL at the bottom of the slide where you can access the report. The picture on the front is the McLennan County Courthouse and is a nod to Judge Coley, who facilitated the conversation for us. The discussion really centered about the way courts throughout the state utilize restraints in juvenile justice cases when a child is in detention. We discussed the different types of restraints that are used, including handcuffs, ankle chains, and body chains that connect both the hands and the feet. Practices really vary in the jurisdictions around our state, and we heard from many of them about the practices that they utilize, and some use restraints in every case. Others almost never use them, only on rare occasions. There are many factors to consider, and we discussed many of them in great detail, including the youth's risk of flight, the danger of the youth to themselves or to other people. Courtroom safety, of course, is paramount. Another factor to consider is courtroom layout, because we know many judges operate in historic buildings, and for some of our child protection courts, for instance, which will now be hearing juvenile cases, they move from court to court and may not have a permanent space. And there's also the question of staff capacity. And of course, procedural justice and due process is also a consideration. The recommendation in the report is for the Commission to continue to provide a multidisciplinary forum to explore the need for court rules and/or to develop guidance on the use of restraints in juvenile court so that we can have some uniformity statewide on how this is approached. And this summer, we will constitute a work group. We'll reach out to the people who participated in the original discussion. And if anyone else is interested, I strongly encourage you to contact me to be part of the conversation. We are committed to continuing that discussion. We don't have a slide on dual status, but I wanted to give a very brief update. Due to the legislative session, our final report from the task force will likely be completed this summer. And I did want to share with you all, we had a very successful Child Protection Court dual status pilot training on April 15th and 16th of 2021. So in the 86th legislative session, the Child Protection Courts were given the ability to hear juvenile justice cases for the first time. And we've identified 3 pilot sites, and those 3 judges and their local stakeholders came together to plan how the courts will structure the pilot and start taking juvenile justice cases. Those 3 courts are Judge Carlos Villalon in the CPC of the Rio Grande Valley West, Judge Cheryl Mabry, the CPC of Hill Country, and Judge April Probst, the CPC of Taylor County. And what's interesting about those jurisdictions is they are geographically diverse, and we also have 1 single county and several multi-county jurisdictions, and it'll be a great way to test out the pilot. OCA is also working on adding juvenile fields to the child protection case management system, and we see that that is a great opportunity to have 1 unified case management system for the child welfare and juvenile cases. So we're really excited about the great and impactful work ahead. And now I will turn it over to Patrick, who's going to go over the financials, and then we'll, as promised, talk about the supplemental funding.
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. Thanks, Jamie. This financial report, if you can go to the next slide, it's available in your meeting notebook on tab 4 and obviously here on the screen. You'll notice in the first section, the disbursements for fiscal year 21 supplemental funding, which the Commission received in March of $581,168, which we'll be discussing in more detail in the next couple of slides. So we're currently, the available funds for FY 2021 were just under $4 million. If we move on down to the obligation sections, we have just over $560,000 left in obligations for our grants. In creating this budget last September, I think we were all pretty optimistic about returning to in-person conferences and trainings for this fiscal year. Unfortunately, that was not the case, but thankfully our partners were able to conduct many of those programs virtually, which significantly reduced the expense to the Commission. As we get closer to the end of this fiscal year, adjustments will be required, and I'll provide some more information on those adjustments at the September meeting. Moving down to the bottom of the financial report, we're currently anticipating a carry forward of about $1.5 million into fiscal year 2022. And as I just mentioned, and feel like a broken record, this number is likely to increase as we move closer to the end of fiscal year 2021. If there's no questions about this financial report, we can move on to the next slide. This is just briefly, I wanted to highlight our grant application posting dates. We're going to have the application go live on May 30th, so the end of this month. Guidelines and the application will be available on the grants webpage from the Children's Commission website. The application will only be open till August 1st. You'll notice, and typically the Children's Commission only has one general grant application. For FY 2022, we're going to have a separate application to track the emergency funding. And if we can move on to the next slide, I'll give you some more information about what those funds are going to be used for. So the emergency or supplemental funds have a more specific directive on their use. The program instructions received with the funding require it to be used to address needs stemming from COVID-19 to ensure the continued mission of safety, permanency, and well-being needs of children. The ACF has provided specific allowable cost, which include technology investments, training for judges, attorneys, and caseworkers on remote hearings, programs to help families address aspects of the case plan to avoid delays that are a direct result of COVID-19, and then other purposes to assist courts, court personnel, or related staff related to COVID-19. For more information on these use of funds, the program instructions can be found at that link there that you see at the bottom of the slide. And as David mentioned briefly, the commission staff and OCA have identified a couple programs that fall into the prescribed categories for allowable costs for these funds. And at this time, I'll pass it back to Jamie to give you some more information on those proposals.
Thanks, Patrick. We can go to the next slide. So you may be wondering what the amount is. It's right here at the top of the slide. Texas received $581,168 in supplemental funding, in addition to the amounts that we normally receive as part of the court improvement grant. Unlike the typical award received from the Administration for Children and Families, the emergency funds have very specific guidelines, as Patrick just outlined for us. They must be obligated by September 30th of 2022. So we were hoping to do a vote today to allow sufficient time for us to receive and review the applications prior to the start of fiscal year 2022, because we'll only really have a year to get something off the ground. There are two items we want to propose that we believe fall into the scope of the program instructions. And the first one is this, we're calling it virtual hearing impact study. Those are just loose terms to try to describe what we want to do with the monies. We have a lot of anecdotal information about the benefits of virtual hearings. What we don't have is data and research about the efficacy of remote hearings and or hybrid hearings. Certainly, that's something that we're all about to discover. We really want to increase our capacity to understand what the best parts are of remote hearings and our ability to hold on to those good parts. And we also need to do a lot of training on how to maximize the benefits of technology in our hearings. So we want to train legal stakeholders, that includes judges, attorneys, court staff, and others, on how to maintain the benefits of technology moving forward. We plan to do this by 2 contract positions. One is a data analyst and one is a research attorney who can really help us have the bandwidth to dedicate their full time to this during a 1-year period. So it would run from September to September. But we wouldn't be able to spend the entire amount that you see, the $192,000, between now and September. But what we would need to do is start to develop the position, and we would need authority to start that work so that we could get it off the ground for a 1-year contract. I'm going to move to the second idea on the next slide, which has to do with the equipment and technology needs. So what we'd like to do is outfit the child protection courts with additional equipment to enable them to conduct hybrid hearings moving forward. This could include a camera, speakers, visual display, etc. The needs will undoubtedly vary depending on the court. As I mentioned before, some child protection courts travel to multiple jurisdictions, so they may need some devices to make them more mobile. But we asked OCA to provide us with an estimate, and we wanted to pilot it in 2 courts, one that's multi-county and travels, and the other that is stationary in a single county. What we're asking for today is a not to exceed amount of $15,000 to be able to explore this with those 2 pilot sites. And then OCA is going to conduct a survey to assess the needs of each individual court that have an interest in continuing virtual or hybrid hearings, so we can really have a better sense of the investment at the September commission meeting. We will provide you with an update when we come back to you in September. And doing the math, Patrick has done the math for me, that would leave us, as the proposals that we're sharing with you today, that would leave us with about $374,000 of emergency funding remaining. Some of that might go to this equipment. As I mentioned, these are just 2 pilot courts, but we are hoping that the rest can go to some of those grants that Patrick just mentioned, the second COVID-19 grant opportunity that we will be posting. That's all I have to share with you on these 2 proposals. The last thing I did want to mention before I turn it over for questions is that our 5-year strategic plan is due to the Children's Bureau at the end of June, and we will be convening a strategic planning committee to go over our plan. My goal is to consolidate the 9 goals we have to the 5 that are aligned with the committees that we've shared with you today. So we will have a lot more information about that at our September meeting. And if we can go to the next slide, I would like to open the floor to anyone who has any questions about the supplemental funding or any of the projects that we've just shared with you.
Can you say a little bit more about the carry forward money and in addition to the supplement, and if there's thoughts about what to do with, I think I recall Patrick saying about 1.48 million.
Absolutely. Jessica, could you scroll back to that to the report page? So typically with the way the Children's Commission operates, our grants are each fiscal year grant can be used for that current fiscal year and the following fiscal year. We typically, as we had in 2018 when we went before the state legislature to get money, when our federal funding, was in a bit of uncertainty, we have since carried forward typically just over $1 million to cover operating expenses in the event that something like that were to happen again. We'd be able to fund the commission, finish up the projects, et cetera. This is a little bit higher than what we would typically carry forward. And as I mentioned, I anticipate it going up a little bit more once we get closer to the end of the fiscal year and we start realizing what programs are not going to be able to materialize due to COVID-19 still preventing those conferences and stuff. We do not, and Gary, if the question is about potential lapse or anything, we are in a great position. We are already through the FY 2020 money that we carried forward from last year, which you would see up at the very top, that was about 1.3 million. And we are currently into our 2021 funding, which can be allocated up to September 30th of 2022.
Great, thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions or discussions? This would be the appropriate time to voice any concerns or questions or comments. All right, thank you to Jamie, Dylan, Jocelyn, and Renee, and all our Patrick, all our commission leadership for your presentations. They were excellent, thorough, and informative. And at this point, everyone now has had the opportunity to listen to more detail about the proposed activity and to review the proposed activities and expenditures for the supplemental funds between now and the September meeting. There being no other questions, do I have a motion to approve the projects and the associated expenditures that the commission has just presented? Motion, please.
Darlene Byrne, I so move approval.
Thank you. And a second, Darlene Byrne.
Rosie Alvarado, and I second.
Justice Alvarado, thank you. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye and raising your hand on the screen so that we have a visual. All right, are there any opposed? Please indicate so by raising your hand on the screen. Hearing no opposition, that's also noted for the record, and the motion is adopted. Thank you again to our commission staff for their excellent presentations. And now we move on to commissioner updates, and we did have a request by Chief Justice Darlene Byrne. She had to leave at 11 and she may be gone now, I'm not sure. but I was going to be there. Oh, there you are. Okay, I see you. Yes.
I'm still here, Justice Guzman, and hopefully I can lead by example. My husband is literally about to do a closing argument in Guy Herman's court, and I've got him up on YouTube waiting for that to happen. So I love technology, but you in your report ask us all to do our reports in 3 minutes or less, and I am going to beat that time frame so that we have plenty of time for everybody else. I just wanted to invite everybody to NCJFCJ's annual conference, July 18 through the 21st in St. Louis. You can appear virtually or in person. I will be speaking on the topic of affirmed on appeal related to child welfare cases. So I hope you'll attend that presentation. I also wanted to share with you that I had a wonderful time at the NCJFCJ March Juvenile Justice Conference and presented on the issue of passing on the gavel with confidence, succession planning from the start, so that all your good work and court improvement projects can continue. That was a wonderful opportunity as well. I also want to personally thank Jocelyn Fowler for the Judicial Trauma Institute. She was such a soldier. She made all of us who presented and all of us who quote led the initiative look good and look smart. We've got just such an amazing team at the Children's Commission, and I'm always honored to be among you all. I must part. My husband is literally teed up, ready to do closing, and this case is on contingency fee. So this matters to my kids and their tennis shoes. So it's been a pleasure. I hope I'll get to come back here in a moment.
Thank you, Chief Justice Byrd. We appreciate your leadership, and thank you so much. All right, we will move on then to commissioner updates in alphabetical order. As for the understanding of those that have joined us via YouTube, each commissioner will give an update from their region or practice area. And to give everyone adequate time, we're going to try to limit our remarks to about three minutes, and then pause briefly after each update to take any questions. That's a vital part of our meeting, and so we want to give that opportunity for questions. So in alphabetical order, we begin with our Vice Chair, Judge Gary Cooley.
Thank you. Justice Guzman, it is a privilege to serve as Vice Chair. I appreciate you considering me for that, and it's an honor to serve in this capacity. I know you know how highly I think the work you and the Commission do, and it's just such an honor to fill this role, especially a lot of the folks I know who've served in this role before me. I will give some time back also in March. Judge Jarrett and I presented at NCJFCJ on dual status youth at the Juvenile Justice Conference, and we were happy to get to do that. We thought the presentation went well, and I think that we should be proud in Texas the efforts we're putting into serving dual status youth and the work we're putting in to try to make the outcomes better for those kids that find themselves in that situation. In addition to that, we've continued to do human trafficking work here in Central Texas. We had a regular roundtable meeting this past month, and the next month in June, we do have a special event that I think, as the guidelines have sort of changed for how we can get together and have contact without masks, I think that it'll be a successful event. We have an event here called Not in My City that we really didn't get to have last year. It's a public event, it raises the awareness of human trafficking, not only in our community, but across the country. And we really are looking forward to getting more people involved, getting the word out about the work they do and how to play a role in preventing human trafficking. And so that's taking place next month, and we're looking forward to having everybody back together to fight that here and around the state. And with that, I'll give the time back to you, Justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Cooley. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Judge Cooley or about his report? Oh, all right, hearing none, then Justice Rosie Alvarado.
Good morning, everyone. Just really quick, I also want to give thanks and praise to Jocelyn and Courtney and team for an amazing Judicial Trauma Institute, and for definitely making myself, Judge Villalon, Judge Griffith, and Judge Clark and I look really good during our presentation. So thank you very much for that. My report is going to start off with some happy news. And maybe some sad news too, but potentially some very beneficial news for the commission. Judge Richard Garcia, who has been one of our long-standing associate judges in Bexar County over the Children's Court, retired on April 30th with a 33-year career of service to the children and the families of Bexar County. But what I say is good news, and I say this somewhat jokingly, but somewhat not jokingly, is that he does plan to come back to VJ for us in Bexar County, but he also did represent to me that he does plan to get more involved in child welfare advocacy now in his retirement. So as such, I am nominating him to get involved with the Children's Commission in any capacity that the Children's Commission sees fit. And if you know him well, you will know that he often nominates people in their absence. So I think you will appreciate the comment here. But also realizing that he was leaving some really big shoes to fill. We have spent the last 2.5 weeks in a very intense period of vetting 39 applicants and holding 16 interviews. And it was a very tough decision because we had so many wonderful and very well qualified candidates that put their name in the hat for the associate judgeship. And we ultimately selected Ms. Kimberly Burley. Ms. Burley has dedicated her career to child welfare advocacy with 21 years of working in the DA's office, all in the area of child welfare. And if I am not mistaken, she also served as a member of the Texas Children's Commission Dual Status Task Force, if I'm not mistaken. So we are very much looking forward to having her upcoming swearing in and service on the bench on June 1st. And so also, if you would just Google a couple of the news articles, you'll find out a lot more very interesting facts about her out there. Separately, and we kind of highlighted this already today, pre-pandemic, Judge Sakai signed a special order back in December of 2020, assembling a commission with 3 areas of study, a task force, and it dealt with quality of legal representation, the method behind the appointment of counsel, and the review of reasonable compensation. And we're actually starting to resurrect these plans again because of the pandemic that it stymied them. But what I was really pleased to hear today is that Dylan was talking about this report that just came out. So I'm really looking forward to reading that report. I've already hit print on my printer, so it's sitting over here hot off the press, and I'm going to take a look at it and share it also with my committee. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Also, and this will be my last commentary, is last time I reported to you all that we were in the process of working on kind of a binder set to deliver to any jurisdiction that is interested in opening up a trauma-informed court. And I'm happy to report that we are about halfway through that development. We have also begun collaborating and opening discussions with other jurisdictions. Judge Selena Mireles, Judge Grace Harrington, and Judge Brown. We have been either in communication or scheduling appointments or have appointments scheduled to start those discussions about expanding the potential for these trauma-informed courts in other jurisdictions. And so we're really happy about that. And so that's our update from Bexar County.
Excellent update, and we're glad you nominated Judge Garcia, and congratulations to him on his retirement. And we're certainly grateful for his years of service. We've met him and worked with him, and we hope he will accept your nomination to join us in this important work. Any questions or comments for Judge Alvarado? All right, thank you very much again for all that you do. I don't see Bachelor on my screen, but you may be here. Okay, so we will move on to Corey Benbow, which I did see earlier on the screen. Corey, thanks for your collaboration and for all you do in this The floor is yours.
Thank y'all for having me. I thank y'all for allowing me to participate in the Children's Commission. And I don't have any updates for you today, but I enjoy working and continuing to sit on the Children's Commission and looking forward to working with y'all in the future.
Thank you, Corey. As I said, we appreciate you as well. Then we have Paula Bibbs Samuels. Ms. Bibbs Samuels, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I hope y'all are having a great Friday. Just so you know, telling the speaker to keep it within 3 minutes is like sending me to hell, but I'm going to do this. So anyway, for the individuals who are on our statewide parent collaboration group, we are actually going to start back meeting in person. We actually were approved to do so in May. Region 1 is not going to do it until June because we had already sent out information for a Zoom meeting and we didn't want to try to, contact people to get it changed. We don't know who all got the information ahead of time, but those around the state of Texas are approved to start meeting in person in May. As of May 1, we still have to adhere to the CDC guidelines of wearing our mask and social distancing. On a personal note, I was a part of a parent panel with QPI. I've also presented at the Nurturing Parent panel and early intervention, and we have some other parent liaisons who are serving on different committees in their communities. So our next statewide PCG advisory meeting is going to be set for June, obviously this year. I also met with Deshaun Eames and myself. We met with Jane Brister, who is a part of Arrow. And so we're trying to collaborate to create training for birth and foster parents. And that training is going to focus on embracing and enhancing the relationship between the birth and foster parents to create a lasting support for children and families. I think I told you all, I'm sure I told you all last time, the different work groups and so forth that I've been a part of and I've been invited to. Those invitations keep coming, so I'll keep you all informed. But what I have found is throughout the nation that there is a precedent at this point to talk about racial inequity. And so many of these work groups have invited me to be a part because I'm a person with a lived experience. And also, I'm a person of color, as you can see. And so racial inequity, they want our opinions, our thoughts, our feedback. And so we are constantly working on that and trying to figure out a way where these individuals with lived expertise can have their voices heard, but not just heard, to where the voices are heard and changes are made. So I think I did it, so I'm done. Thank you.
That's an excellent update, and I do. That's the point: is hearing those voices, but also working together to implement change. And I know from having worked with you for many years now, how important the work that you do is, and you speak up, but you also really pursue change. So thank you so much. Any comments or questions for Ms. Bibbs Samuels?
Justice Guzman, I have one question for Ms. Bibbs Samuels. You mentioned your work with Arrow. I wonder, are you exploring the idea of using more virtual interactions to deepen those connections between parents and foster parents? I wonder if that's some of the sort of the silver linings of the pandemic that we haven't thought of as much, of bridging that gap between those two populations with more video conferencing interaction.
First of all, let me say this. I'm collaborating with Jane, who works with Arrow. I don't want to, misconstrue that, and that's fine. But her initial request was to have someone to speak just to bridge the gap, not necessarily virtually, but because we are still virtual, what she wants to do is get I'm going to call it a camera crew, and record a training, and then they'll be able to give that training to the individuals that are, I guess I would say, the foster parents who are involved with Arrow. So we will do some in person, but obviously we can't do a massive group at this time. But so she did mention having recordings.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Blau.
Thank you very much. I have several updates today and appreciate all the great information so far. First of all, as a reminder that May is actually Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think that's important because a lot of activities that we have related to this. The first one actually happened on May 3rd, and it was a screening and panel discussion related to the documentary called A Trusted Space. This is a documentary film that really talks with educators and students and parents and professionals about how to mitigate effects of grief and trauma and anxiety issues that are both had come up and will continue to come up in schools as we return to full time and other kinds of issues. It's a 43-minute documentary film, again, A Trusted Space. And following that film, we held a panel discussion with Commissioner Morath from the Texas Education Agency, Dean Charles Martinez from the School of Education at University of Texas in Austin, and Dr. Pam Wells, who's the Executive Director of the ESC Education Service Center here in Region 4. And so that's actually on our website, and happy to forward the link for that, as well as information if folks are interested in sharing the film, as the Hackett Center had a role in both clinical and the curriculum that was developed. Secondly, during this month, the Hackett Center and the Meadows Institute has teamed up with our OK to Say campaign to create mental health exhibits around the state, one of which has been at the Texas State Capitol. We also have one at City Hall in Houston and at the Discovery Green. And it really reflects 2 empty chairs with information in between where you can actually scan a QR code to get resources. And the empty chairs represent the conversations that are not being had around mental health issues, which is the concept of trying to promote more discussion about mental health and addressing the importance of mental wellness. And in that regard, May 19th through 21st, mark your calendars to drive on Highway 69 into Houston through the Montrose area, where we've teamed up again with the City of Houston and Baylor College of Medicine to light the bridges up green in honor of mental health awareness. Very exciting to do that. And then finally, the Meadows Institute and the Hackett Center, of which we are a regional center of the Meadows Institute, are proud to announce our Engage and Excel conference. This year, it will be held on September 30th and October 1st. It will be a virtual conference with CEUs and other things will be available. And I think it's going to be really important talking about the impact of things like racism on mental health, issues regarding young people going back to school, and so a host of things around veterans and suicide. And so it's really going to be a jam-packed agenda that we feel is going to be really important. Registration for Engage and Excel will open on May 18th. And again, those dates are September 30th, October 1st. This year will be virtual again, and then we'll see each other in person the next time in 2022. So thank you so much for allowing me to share.
That's an excellent report. I'll do a plug for my podcast. I'm on a podcast, Lady Justice, Women of the Court, with the Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, the Supreme Court Justice in Arkansas, and a Supreme Court Justice in West Virginia. But our last podcast was on mental health and well-being, and each justice shared some information about the resources available in their states, mostly through their state bar departments, but that might be a resource. And so thank you, Dr. Blau, for your leadership. There is a lot of stigma around the issue of mental health and being able to discuss it and to get help. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing. Does anyone have any comments for or questions for Dr. Blau? Okay, well then we thank you again, and we will move on to our Judge Susan Brown from Houston. Welcome, Judge Brown. We're so glad you're with us today. Everyone, I've said that for Judge Brown, but that's for everyone.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. I will put a plug in for this city of Houston. And if you haven't seen our lit up bridges, please drive by in May. They are really amazing. So we may not have fabulous weather, but we have fabulous lit up bridges. I'm going to jump into my report because it's been very busy in the 11th region in the last couple of months. We brought a new CPC court on last year, and Charles Griffin is the judge of that court. And so we have now added another PAL docket along with Katrina Griffith's PAL docket. Judge Griffin also has a new docket, which is streamlining adoption. So cases that come in and it's very obvious that that is the direction that they're going to go in. He has streamlined that. The hearings are shorter and trying to move and to discover what the problems are that are preventing adoptions from moving quickly. So he is doing his best to remove those barriers and get those kids into permanency as soon as possible. He's also working with CASA on developing strike force teams where the CASA workers have special education or background that they can be specifically matched with some kids to sort of identify issues and get those handled at the outset of the case. Judge Griffith indicated to me that she has seen a great decrease in adoption times, and I think that's true throughout the region. We see a lot of kids who are exiting care. In Wharton, we had 45% of our kids who were, the families were unified, which is a huge increase in the number of family unifications. So we're seeing a lot of that just throughout the region in the counties with our CPC courts. Justice Griffith, who is in Harris County only, has also identified that there are a number of kids who are desiring to return to care. So she's working in with the Division X program. The other thing that we are fortunate to have in Region 6 is that we are one of the pilot areas for TexPop, and we have our first set of kids, families, and foster families that are working on that in one of our family drug courts. And we're really excited about that. I'm on that committee, and it is a really, really wonderful program. And I'm so glad that Region 6 was asked to be a part of it. I think it's going to make a lot of difference just in getting foster families and biological families and kids all working together with workers so that we are moving towards some real benefit for reunification for those families. So we're very excited about that. In Wharton, we've been accepted as an NCJFCJ site, and that is Judge Rawlinson, which is really great for us because unfortunately, Wharton County, very small, we have very few foster families and very, very little resource. So being a site, an implementation site is really exciting for that. And in Fort Bend, Justice Rawlinson has also started a collaborative program with all the stakeholders, getting together and looking at some of the new programs that can be implemented in Fort Bend that maybe we haven't been able to do for the last several years. So she's got everybody working on that to implement Safe Babies, a new family drug court, and also they are a pilot for a CFE in the emergency stage. So we have a lot of things going on. Judge Griffin, along with Judge Gonzalez in Dallas and Judge James in Brazos County, are working together to put on a immigration CLE. And I think Judge Gonzalez is leading the sort of information being spread. But they're trying to be able to focus on that and some training about immigration for everybody that's involved in those cases. So he's doing that. Judge Graves Harrington and I are putting together a seminar probably in the fall for our family court, juvenile court, and I'm sort of hopeful criminal court judges. After we attended the TBRI, the Justice Trauma Institute training, after we got done crying, and threw away all our Kleenexes that were scattered around the room, we decided it was time, thanks y'all, we decided it was time to make some changes. So we want to introduce that throughout Harris County for sure, and hopefully include some of the other counties in the region. We're really excited about that training. We took so much away from that. And so we are really excited on getting that going. So many props to those of you who put that on or were presenters, because it really was eye-opening for everyone. So I hope that you will do it again next year and that way we can include even more of our judges. And then the last thing, Judge Alvarado mentioned that in Harris County, we are meeting with Judge Alvarado, Judge Graves Harrington and I in June to talk about starting a Pearls Court. And so I was very excited to find Judge Graves Harrington was as interested in it as I was. So we hope to get that started at least after the first of the year. And that's our busy report from Region 11. And I hope I was under 3 minutes because I tried to talk really fast.
That was a fantastic report, though. We I'm really glad to hear what you took away from the training, the TBRI, and that you're taking. That's the idea, is to take it back home to your communities and to share it, if you find it helpful, with as many judges as possible. If there's anything we can do to help bring the criminal court on board. I know in the past, we have gone down to Houston to speak with the judges. Justice Countess was in our first meeting. And so we're happy to do that, and let us know. Justice Countess.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. It's always hard to follow Judge Brown because she's done 1,000 things since the last meeting. And I'm really just going to share one with you. But this past spring, I participated with a colleague of mine in the virtual Child Welfare Judges Conference that was put on by the Texas Center for the Judiciary. We pre-recorded, so unfortunately there was not any live interaction, but it was an appellate panel. So the purpose, of course, was to cover some of the issues related to the termination of parental rights cases that we see at our level. And I think it turned out really good. I was very honored to get to speak because we really have a pretty significant part of our docket involves these cases. And as I've mentioned before, if we're getting them, it's because there was a pretty heartbreaking outcome. They're extremely important. They involve fundamental rights. And so we were excited to be able to address a few things in our panel. And I just thought I'd share, we basically picked a few questions that we then answered. And so I just so you kind of can get a flavor for what it is that we deal with. These are the questions that we covered. It was a pretty short panel, like 45 minutes. So we talked about what is the most common delay justices see in these types of appeals. And I'm not going to go through the answers, but I'll just give you what the questions were. We talked a lot about this question: would the justices like to see attorneys for children participate more in appeals brought by parents? And if so, how? And that was a really interesting discussion. We talked about, they asked, what is your impression of the single most important thing attorneys for parents could do better in prosecuting these appeals? And then the same question regarding attorneys for the department. What common briefing errors are seen that could easily be addressed? What common mistakes do the justices see in the way trial attorneys present proof for the appellate record that can easily be addressed? And I hate the use of the word mistakes because it's not always necessarily a mistake. It's just sometimes strategy or other things weigh in that prevent you from maybe doing something a certain way. Lawyers don't always have their eye on what might happen at the appellate level. And so again, that was part of our goal, was to kind of start a discussion that might help some of the lawyers keep these things in mind when they're in front of the trial court. And then let's see, there was, I guess that was really the main stuff. We talked a little bit too about, there's a lot of statutory review and status hearings that are held in child protection cases, as of course you all know. And those are often in the record, but there are always a lot of questions about whether we look at those and we consider them or not. So we discussed that in terms of what is evidence, what is not evidence, what are we allowed to look at, what are we not, and that sort of thing. So I think it turned out really, really good. And I hope that it was really helpful to the attorneys. It's unfortunate we couldn't get any live feedback, but Those are definitely things that we spend a lot of time preparing and substantive answers on in hopes of helping. And that's basically what I've done lately. I also have heard great feedback from judges in my area about the Judicial Trauma Institute. So congratulations to all of you who were involved in that. And thanks for letting me speak today.
Thank you, Justice Countess. Great program that you've described. So I don't know, Justice Mascio, I saw you nodding at a few points. Do you have any comments? I know that you've worked on these issues yourself, or anyone else. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Anyone else have a comment or a question?
The only way you put me on the spot was I had to turn my mute off and get everything ready. I don't have any comment. I just want to say, listening and watching this morning, I'm just so impressed and proud of Jamie and everybody on the commission staff, and through really challenging times, not only the last year, what everybody's been through, but these more immediate challenges that Trevor and others have talked about. I just think that under Justice Guzman, your leadership, what you've put together with this commission and the people who are assembled here to take these challenges on, it's just really great to see, and very proud of everybody and all you're doing.
Thank you. I promise I asked him to do that earlier, but seriously, this is one of the strongest board of commissioners that we've had in a long time. Everybody is engaged, everybody's leading, everybody's working, and it's really just an honor to get to work with each of you. So thanks, Justice Massingale. And then we'll move on to Judge Ferguson.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. Hello, everyone. Now that the COVID restrictions are starting to be lifted and the president has told us it's okay to start getting together if we're vaccinated, I know that a lot of you are excited, like I am, to get back to some of the in-person proceedings that are so special to us. Like, for example, the adoptions that come at the end of this long, painful road and involve an army of people like you trying to come up with a happy ending for the child. And I can't wait to get back to having the children get to bang my Thor's hammer as a gavel at the end when they gavel the end of their adoption and their new family. But we also know that being forced to do this for a year, we realize now how much we can accomplish with this additional tool in our toolkit of having the remote hearings. For example, I just agreed to do my 25th CLE presentation during the pandemic. Obviously, you can't do that unless you have remote hearings, because where I live, it's a 3-day trip for a 1-hour event to get anywhere else in the state. That same thing has brought us into this access to justice revolution in child welfare cases. And it's unprecedented what it has done for the child welfare cases in my court. The ad litems are bonding better with the children. They're seeing the children regularly. All of our foster placements are coming into our hearings, which used to be a war to get them to join. And now they're all there. And in fact, we have a rule in my court that you don't get to be a foster placement unless you have the ability to Zoom into a court hearing. So I won't even let them be approved until they tell me they can do it. That's how important it is. The ad litems are doing their jobs better. It's better for the children. It's better for me. I can see the kids more often. And that bond, that connection changes me when I look at these kids and think about what we can do for the kids. And I want to share one quick example of how a child's life may be forever changed just by having the ability to have a remote proceeding instead of trying to force in-person proceedings. I have one case, and it's still ongoing, so I'm not going to give any specifics, but I have a case where I got to see this very, very young child on camera. And when the child came on camera, the child's hair was slightly less vibrant than Milbury's. It was red hair, and no one else I had ever seen in the case had red hair. And I said, well, where is this red coming from? And the mother said, well, we have no idea where the red's coming from. There's no red in our family. Well, shortly thereafter, the mother tragically died, and we did not know who the father was. So now I have a 1-year-old child and no parent. And long and short of it was we got a hold of her phone and found a contact in the phone titled Baby Daddy. No idea who it was, but we got the person on the other end of that number to virtually join us from active duty military deployment. And he came on camera with his hat on. And I said, if you would be so kind, now that we're in the courtroom, please remove your hat. And when he took that hat off, this explosion of red glossy locks came out and fell down. And I gasped. And I said, I'm not prejudging anything. We haven't had a DNA test, but I cannot tell you how happy I am to see the hair under that hat. So it is possible that because of remote proceedings with a man that we would never have been able to meet or see or talk to, he zoomed in from his deployment. And there's a fair chance that that DNA test will not exclude him as the father. The impact on this infant's life chokes me up when I think about what that means. If in fact this is the father, if it weren't for remote proceedings, this child would go through life never knowing a parent. And now this child has an opportunity, maybe, I hope, to have a relationship with a father. So that is the kind of difference that having these remote proceedings going forward can have on the children we serve. So I do want to mention one thing about the virtual bench book group. They are hard at work and their product is looking good. And yesterday I had to send them an email that said, by the way, House Bill 567 looks like it's going to be signed and it changes all of your reports. And so now they're having to do another section, one that is pre-effective date, and we don't yet know what that date is or whether it will be filed after or pending on. Or so they're now back hard at work with a sigh, trying to prepare another section for the book. But it's coming along great, and I think everyone here is going to be proud of it by the time it's done. So that's my time. Thank you, Justice Guzman.
Thank you, Judge Ferguson. I hope that when you testified before the legislature, you told that story about the red hair. But, you know, on a serious note, you're absolutely right that is a connection that would have been impossible before we all learned to work with the virtual hearings. And on a second note, thank you for your continued leadership on the virtual hearings supplement to our bench book. I think everyone on the commission is very grateful for the work, and we're very proud for all of the contributions and the team you've assembled. Does anyone have any questions for Judge Ferguson or any comments? All right, thank you. Again, excellent work. Ann Halligenstein.
Thank you, Justice. I presented last time, so this time Judge Sage is going to present for Casey Family Programs on a couple of projects that we have going on. I have to say we're both very excited about the report, the task force report on parent representation. Judge, do you want to jump in here?
Well, sure. Just to say, there are a couple of legal representation type projects that we're working with the commission on. As Dylan mentioned, we're working on the evaluation of the 2 PMC courts because we think Texas has a really unique product in that type of court, and we want to help spread that around the nation. And this evaluation, I think, will prove the good work that these judges are doing. And so we're interested in investing in that. At the same time, we're looking at some of the recommendations that came out of the Legal Representation Committee's report that would involve multidisciplinary representation, involving social workers and parent advocates in with the lawyers. And that has become very popular and very effective around the nation. And we want to help spread those ideas and concepts across Texas. So we're looking at a couple of pilots working with the Children's Commission on those areas, along with a comprehensive sort of best practices in a jurisdiction that we can implement in the next 2 to 3 year period. So that's kind of where Casey is right now. thank you, Ann, for the opportunity to report.
Yeah, just a couple of other things. I just have to send out a shout out to Paula. Thank you for your contributions. One of our big projects is race equity improvement through the purchasing of PEI services, prevention and early intervention services. And your lived experience and expertise is invaluable. So thank you, Paula.
All right, well, thank you, Judge Sage. Judge Sage is a valued long-term friend of the commission, first serving as a commissioner, jurist in residence, and now working with Casey, leading at Casey. So thank you so much for all that you've done. And of course, we appreciate the longstanding working relationship with you, and we're glad that you're back with us as a commissioner. That's fantastic. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Justice.
Of course. Okay. Hearing no questions or comments for Judge Sage or Ann Helgenstein, we will move on to Judge Huffstedler, Brazoria County's best.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. It's my honor to be on this commission. Every time we get together, and I'm looking at our participants group, it was at 57, it's now 54. It is amazing the number of brilliant people that participate in this. And Justice Guzman, I echo what you said, that this is a very strong commission with a very diverse group of people. And I go away from these things just excited with a lot of the things that are going on around the state. And Judge Ferguson, thank you for sharing that story. Those are the stories that keep us going. It's like that hole-in-one that I've never achieved. I'm out there trying it every once in a while, but haven't achieved it. Once I do, I probably will quit because that's the ultimate. But those stories are amazing stories. A couple of things happening here in Brazoria County. Well, first, let me say this. It is my honor to take up the gap that was left in the now absence of Judge Dean Rucker. I met Judge Rucker many years ago on a panel, and it seemed like after meeting Judge Rucker, everywhere I turned, he was there and had been there for quite some time. And just like with this committee, the Legal Practice and Process Committee, he was already there. And it's an honor to try to fill those shoes, and I will do my dead level best to do that. Kudos to Dylan and the staff with the commission. It's a great staff of folks, and it's a pleasure to work with these folks. And I don't think any of them know the word no, N-O. It's just, what can we do next, and how can we do that? How can we help you? And we're here to help you. And never before have I ever seen an organization that these people really mean it. It's not like we'll have lunch one day and never comes. These are the people that say, yes, what can we do? And then they're reaching out to give you some resources. So kudos to Dylan and the staff. Here in Brazoria County, some of the things we're working on, we're trying to come back to speed June 1 with opening here in this court and having the in-person hearings and or hybrid hearings. I have kind of waited till June 1. One of the things that we're going to start here in Brazoria County is the brown bags. Renee mentioned this earlier. We're going to put on some brown bags here for our attorneys, and those brown bag lunches are just some times where we can get together and we can have some Q&A, but we can also have some training. One of the things that I brought out of the Legal Practice and Process Committee was we really need to stay on that to make sure that these folks are getting the best possible representation that they can. During this pandemic, as has been said by a number of folks, we've taken away a lot of good things from this. One of the things that I've really seen that has increased is the ability of the parents who are in the system to participate in services with telemedicine and all the other different types of virtual services that are available. Some of these folks who don't have the ability to get out, and we've always had issues with transportation being an issue for a lot of these folks. They don't even have to go anywhere. They can stay home, get on their smartphone, and they can participate in most, if not all, the services through the virtual processes. And that's one of the things that I hope we continue, because we've really seen an uptick in the services that have been completed. So we're waiting on June 1 to have that brown bag. We're hoping to be able to put some of those together and really dive into some training for our local attorneys. Another thing that I brought out of the legal practice committee was I'm going to be putting together some cards and or laminated materials that we're going to be posting around the courthouse for our parents, because it's amazing how many of these folks just don't know the resources that are available to them. One of the scariest things in the world is to get that knock at the door and open it and CPS says, "We're here to see you." And these parents who've never gone through a situation like this don't know where to turn. And it's not until they get to court where they get an attorney assigned to them that they actually get some answers. So what we're trying to do is put some resources, the information about all the resources that are available through the commission into the hands of these parents when they come to court. I love what Dylan was saying about the comic book, and that's reaching out to these kids that are going to be involved. Again, it's not a process that they're familiar with. And if we can put some resources into the hands of these kids and or parents, it helps them to see this not as a bad thing, but something that where some good can come out of it. Also, I mentioned this in one of our committee meetings. There is in Dallas, there's a place called the Lala Cafe. And what I enjoyed about that story, seeing it on the bucket list show, was that the guy who was managing it is connecting with children and giving them a job there at the Lala Cafe, where they might not otherwise have the ability to get out and get a job. These are kids who have gone through CPS who are still in CPS and or foster care. And it's a great story in Dallas about how the manager and owner of this cafe decided he wanted to reach out and help some of the kids. I've identified one of those types of coffee shops here in Brazoria County, and I'm going to be working with them to try to make to make a connection with some of our kids and our foster kids, and try to get them in touch there, because they may not have another opportunity to go work someplace. But if we can put them in a place like that, the guy at Lala Cafe taught them how to budget, how to put their monies together, and all different kinds of things that you can pour into these kids. So I'm working on putting one of those together here in Brazoria County as well. Had the opportunity to be on a judges panel for the Innovations Breaking Boundaries in Custody Litigation that's going to be presented virtually May 27 and 28. And on that judges panel, what we were dealing with were the custody litigation, custody evaluations, and things of that sort. One of the things that came out of that was that we really need to involve these folks on mental health type cases. There's a lot, and Justice Guzman, you said it right. There's a lot of stigma that's attached to that, and we as judges have an opportunity to try to remove that. And I'll just tell you real quick, one of the best stories that I heard about mental illness is this. Some people struggle with diabetes because the pancreas doesn't produce what it needs to produce in order for the body to process sugar. It's the same way with mental health. There's a lot of folks whose brain doesn't produce the certain amount of chemicals that the brain needs in order to process things. And we have to supplement that, just like you supplement someone who has diabetes with insulin or other types of medication. All you're really doing in a mental health issue, and a lot of these, is supplementing the chemical that the brain is not processing. And I know for a lot of the folks that have come in front of me, that really took away some of that stigma that's always been attached to mental health. And we as judges, we have an opportunity to do that. And I try to make sure that people understand it's not an issue with me. It's just an issue that needs to be dealt with but it's not an issue that's going to cause me to think badly or poorly of you because that's an issue that you're dealing with. So kudos to the folks who are on staff, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve here, and that's my report. Thank you, Justice Guzman.
Thank you for that excellent report, Judge Hufstetler. Are there any questions or comments for Judge?
Just very briefly, I would like to say for anybody that has any input on staying virtual, please, please, please advocate for that, because a lot of parents, you have one person that's working. And so if we require them to go to all of these trainings and parenting and psychologist appointments, then that person that's working does not get income. And so if they don't get income, they can lose their houses. So many things that can happen. But if they can do it at a time where they're at home and they can continue to work, it's a great benefit, and they need that because CPS or child welfare requires so much of us, and I don't care about that. I'm not complaining, but in that, you're taking away the time that these families have to do the things the way that they're used to living. And so kudos to all of you all who are advocating to keeping some things virtual.
That's a really important point, and I hope that it's one that we can get across to the decision makers in the legislature about the the game changer that virtual hearings are in the child welfare cases because of the limited resources, financial or otherwise, that our parents experience. And so it's just critical, and I hope we can get that point across. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to Judge Mireles. Judge.
Good morning, almost afternoon to everyone. I'm going to go ahead and explain to you where I'm at in my counties. At the last session, I discussed the Trafficking Emergency Network Diversion Program, which is our TEND, TEND program in Laredo Webb County and Zapata County. We submitted a grant to start this program. If funded, the project will begin on October the 1st, 2021. If not funded, the network will continue to seek funds to develop and implement this diversion project. Our group of core legal and court network partners presented our ideas of our network initiative at a virtual UN Commission on the Status of Women conference, which was held on March 19th of 2021. We received feedback from individuals from several places as far as Germany, Argentina, who were interested in sharing their efforts and take some of our ideas back with them and incorporate them there as well. This is a project that we have that we are hoping to implement with working with parents. However, also another project that we have also looking at right now is working with children. We applied recently through the NCJ-FCJ Novo Foundation grant for targeted technical assistance to support systems-based solutions to commercial sexual exploitation. This grant would provide technical assistance to multidisciplinary teams working to implement evidence-based or promising practices that are court-led. If you all are interested, there is an application out there, and Ms. Amy Corbin can send the link after the meeting. The due date is May 21st, and it is for grant funding for targeted technical assistance to support this particular work with commercial sexual exploitation and combating that. So we will send that out through a link after the meeting to everyone who may be interested. Now, the updates on our hardworking human trafficking work group. We've narrowed down our projects. Although we had so many ideas for future projects, we decided to narrow it down, focus on the top 2 projects, but we also are focusing our efforts on updating the Children's Commission's bench book chapter on human trafficking. So that's one of our core projects. As well, we're also creating an educational webinar for judges and attorneys on human trafficking. In addition to that, we'll be scheduling a SEIT, which is a sexual exploitation identification tool overview for the work group, and discuss ways to improve education, training, and the use of this particular tool. So that's what we're doing on the human trafficking work group. We're working very hard. I know Amy's been working very hard as well, and I know that we're going to continue to hopefully be able to present our efforts at our next sessions that we have. One of the last things that I'll touch upon, I went ahead and through the Texas Young Lawyer Association, although I'm not a young lawyer at all in any means, I don't know why they invited me, but I was glad to see that they invited me, and I was able to color my hair for the first time in a year. So I was very excited about that. And I presented on a video virtual on dangers of human trafficking and how the challenges we face in combating human trafficking and what the public should know about human trafficking and how they should support victims of human trafficking. So we're happy that that went out. I hope it came out okay and my hair looked all right. That's what I'm hoping. That was my main concern. I know that's crazy, but I hadn't colored my hair in a year, so that was exciting for me. That's all I have.
That's excellent report. And I sat in on the meeting for the human trafficking work group. And Amy, thank you for all that you're doing. And also the work group, it was really heartening to see these, very strategic, considered efforts to deal with this problem from the perspective of the judiciary. What can we do? There are many, many groups that are working to eradicate human trafficking, and it's an issue that impacts communities of color and lower income communities in a way that's really disconcerting. And so the human trafficking group, I invite you to look at their work. There's some great ideas that were put forth, and so we're looking forward, and we thank you, Judge Bareilles, for your work on that. And on the hair, I saw a YouTube video with my hair down to here early on in the pandemic, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's my hair. So, it's just part of what 2020 brought us. But anyway, anyone have any comments or questions for Judge Mireles? Great report. Okay, hearing none, we will move on to Katie Oles. I know I saw you here.
Hi, yes, I'm here. Thank you. We've been really heavily focused on the foster care capacity issue, helping an array of providers around the state in so many ways, trying to help them preserve capacity. Also, while trying to think of ways to continue to raise the bar with regard to safety and quality, and not letting or losing sight of the other pillars of child welfare, of course, permanency and well-being. So lots of work underway collaboratively at every level, really, of the state to try to work on this immediate issue. And also to Luann's comments earlier regarding looking ahead, we're working on several initiatives designed to improve services for children and youth in the foster care system. I think it's really easy to get stuck in the immediate crisis, but we're never going to get out of this until we also figure out longer term solutions. So our eye is on both of those right now. To that end, our community-based care readiness work is well underway in the Houston area and the Dallas area, and a very special thanks to Therese Stevenson with the Reese Jones Foundation, who's on this commission and has been a huge part of the work up in Region 3 with a consortium up there. So that collaboration is underway. And Trevor mentioned that we are waiting on the legislature to guide the next stages and locations for community-based care. But regardless of what the legislature decides, we think this work has great value anyway. And Trevor, I wanted to just check in real quick. You mentioned regions 2, 5, and 4, 5, and 9 as being the next areas, but I also think Region 3 East may also be on that short list or on deck. Okay, I see you nodding, thanks. We're also very focused on prevention and family preservation, including post-permanency services development with the Families First Act and legislation winding its way through the Texas legislature right now. We can see the work ahead to help guide community-based organizations to be ready to help implement prevention-focused programs, including mental health and parent supports. We're working alongside Ann Helgenstein and Casey Family Programs on the National Thriving Families Initiative. It's a national effort to help support communities in better serving their families, and Texas was selected to be one of those sites. And so it may be a good potential agenda item for a future commission meeting to invite Sasha Roscoe here to talk about that work. But lots going on, and we're always here to help support you all and partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That's a great report as well. Anyone have any comments or questions or All right, well, we thank you for your continued work, and I know you've been with us for a while as well, so thank you, Katie. Then we have Chief Justice Robbie Partida Kipnis from the Dallas Court of Appeals. Justice Partida Kipnis.
Hello, everybody. Oh, Justice Guzman, did you elevate me to Chief Justice? Don't tell my court that.
I think so.
The 12 of them will freak out. Okay. Hello, everybody. And thank you to everybody who's given reports. Y'all have done a great job. And I second what Justice Massengale said about Justice Guzman and the rest of the commission's report. I'm going to give a report for our permanency court. It is run by Judge Delia Gonzalez, and she was not able to be here today. And so she asked me to go ahead and give her report. She said our permanency court co-sponsored a CLE regarding sex trafficking and foster youth, and that they also have an organization that's providing counseling and case management services for our youth who have been trafficked. And another thing regarding, she said, kids without placement has been pretty common right now, and that kids have been sleeping in CPS offices, but that has not happened in her permanency court because they've been working extra hard to find out-of-the-box solutions. For instance, they're reaching out to second and third cousins to help out with the child. And she said here recently, they did reach out to a second cousin who didn't have anybody to watch the child, but was able to take him to work with him. And all the other workers were able to help supervise the child while they were virtual learning. So they're really working hard to think out of the box and get other relatives down the line to help out so they aren't having children sleeping in the court or to avoid them being in placement. That's all that I have today, but thank you to everybody. I always feel better after these meetings and really puts everything into perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The appellate court perspective is a vital to the work that we do. And so we appreciate Justice Partida Kipnis keeping abreast of issues along with Justice Countess in the appellate courts and ensuring that that information is brought to our attention. And thank you for giving the report for Judge Delia Gonzalez. We are thankful for her work as well. Any comments or questions at this point? All right, then we are, Judge Rind couldn't be with us today, but I do see Judge Mike Snyder. Judge Snyder.
Thank you, Your Honor. And good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to briefly thank Jamie and Dylan for including me in their meeting with Representative Frank to discuss Bill 576, and especially thank Dylan for his work with the Data Committee. As many of you all know, for years I have wanted to have some sort of integration between the CPCMS database and CPS, not only because it's a great resource for judges, but also researchers. And this could also be a big time saver for FPS. Everything else that I've been involved in the child welfare system in the last few months has actually been there's still pending cases, so I can't really talk about them, but that's mainly what I've been involved in. And that's my report for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Judge Snyder. Some of us follow you on Twitter and keep up with your work, and we thank you for your dedication to children of our state, our most vulnerable children. Then we have Judge Shelton. I know I saw you on. There you are, Judge Shelton.
Thank you, Justice. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you that I hardly talk, but when I do talk, you can't shut me up. So I did set the timer on my phone. COVID, I think, has been one of the worst occurrences in my lifetime. But, as far as child welfare cases in our county, it's really opened up the door to a lot of positive changes. It's kind of given us an opportunity or maybe even an excuse to kind of reinvent ourselves. We're seeing a lot more, like everyone else, more parent participations in our child welfare cases. That's probably due to Zoom. I like Zoom and the technology, Judge Ferguson. I like it. I think I understand it. I can use it. I helped a couple of other judges set up their Zoom and YouTube accounts and some special email accounts, for exhibits, and so we can do the shared screen. I asked the computer techs here at the courthouse if I could wear a tool belt, and they said no. So I think that's over. We're starting to see and engage more of professionals from other disciplines in our especially in our child welfare cases, like substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, sex trafficking, things like that. They're attending our hearings by Zoom because they can do it easily from their office. We get them engaged sooner in all of our cases with our parents. We can make immediate referrals, right then and there when the issue comes up in our case. And the courts are able to get more updates directly from the agencies rather than going through, CPS. So I like that. We are seeing a lot more reunifications, and I don't know if that's because we're doing something right or just because, we have more cases. So I'm kind of interested in looking at the numbers on that eventually. We did have a team that did participate in the Trauma Institute, and that was really good. I mean, that was one of the coolest, programs I have been to. We were at the court specialty court conference, and then the day before we started the Trauma Institute, they kind of had a good lead in with another with a program on trauma. So it was great, and I really think that kind of suits my personality. I think I can do that because I'm kind of passive aggressive and I'm kind of even tempered, and the passive aggressive part really aggravates my wife. But anyway, I like engaging the parents. I like to try to find something in common that I have with them, and I think that develops the trust, and I can develop a rapport. And then I think they always feel like they get a better a better deal in the end. Oops, that's my 3 minutes. But I'll close in saying that that after that program, I think it was imperative that we had more parent representation training, and so I was really interested in Dylan and in that report. Focusing on the basic needs of the parent, like shelter, communications, and income, so that they can get a good start, so they can start their assessments. I think we're going to start looking at trying to treat the parent, working to build the parents into better, healthy persons before we really focus on, developing them as better, healthy parents. And that's a bit of a shift in thinking. And I really thought I invented this idea, but Dylan, apparently I didn't. So I thought a social worker intern would be great, to work with the attorneys. A couple of weeks ago, I had talked to our local university who said that they would, that I think I can get a social intern or two to kind of work with the court, and so that I can, again, get the parents right to a social worker from the get-go, help the attorneys. And also, I think that can help us with data collection. Also, I've got a mental health juvenile justice court, and so getting a social worker involved in that on some level might help, because, the kids are easy to work with. The parents are really difficult. I think that's about it for now. I'll save the rest of my stuff for next time. And I guess, Justice, I owe you a minute or two. Sorry.
Thank you for the thorough report. And your comment about your wife and the passive aggressive reminded me when I got on the Supreme Court, there was a case about police officers. And I said, oh, I've been married to one for 30 years. And then I said, oh, wait, it's been 20. It only feels like 30. And that was on video. So this is on video for your wife.
Oh, no. Don't tell her.
So I had to come home and confess to my husband that I had said that, just,
Yeah.
So you'll have to confess, but thank you for the report. Any questions for Judge Shelton? All right.
I have a question, but just real quick, one quick comment, Judge Shelton. When you said that the parents are really hard to deal with, I'll tell you that because of the great work that you're starting to do and a lot of others because of the Trauma Institute and just realizing the trauma that these parents go through, the parents are getting easier to deal with. They had a very big distrust for the system because they weren't being heard. So it's becoming easier. And I think the more effort we put into actually engaging the parents, we'll see a lot better outcome with the parents as well.
That's a great point. And I think it was that mentioned giving parents tools and what it would feel like to have the government show up at your front door, knock on the door. We're here from the government. We're here to help, as was famously said. That's pretty scary. Then you throw in a language barrier and all sorts of other barriers that arise in that context. So thank you for that point, and thank you, Judge Hufstedler. I meant to tell you that any of those tools that you are preparing for parents that can be shared would be helpful across our state, I am sure. Luann Southern had to leave the meeting, and so we Texas Casa, Vicki Spriggs. Vicki.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Justice Guzman. First, I'd like to say I've heard, just lots of positive feedback on the trauma conference, but I also had staff come back and they were raving about it. So I wasn't able to attend this year, but the glowing reports just continue to roll through. So thank you, everybody on staff, for doing such a great job. I also want to thank Milbury for inviting us again to be part of the Child Welfare Conference in October. Texas CASA will host a judicial reception on the evening of October 25th. And we're very much looking forward to that in person, which will be wonderful just to see people in person again. I feel like I'm always talking to television when we do these meetings, and our days are all filled with these meetings. I had to leave early before the last meeting ended and before I was able to give my report, but I believe Jamie handed out or distributed to everybody electronically the Texas CASA messaging book. And we created that messaging book to help guide our network in changing and updating our language. As the child welfare system changes, we needed our network, the network of 72 local CASA programs across the state, to upgrade their language as well. We want to highlight and really represent in our language the importance of equity in child welfare. We want to increase inclusiveness in the way we talk about children, families, and the role of CASA volunteers. And we want to get rid of the older ways of thinking that don't represent our values. We know that there's a Kevin Campbell expression where he said, words create worlds. So we know the importance of words. So some of the biggest highlights you're going to see is the inclusion of family in our mission statement, where CASA used to say, we're here to advocate for the best interests of, we're here to advocate for children. We now talk about children and families. We added the and families to our mission statement as well, because we want to move CASA volunteers as the system has moved, the awareness has moved, and we want our volunteers to be very in tune with the awareness of that children do better with families. So you cannot work with the child in isolation of the family. You have to work with the family. So really bringing the family into our mission statement, into our words. Other changes include honoring the youth voice by no longer saying CASA gives a voice to a child, but instead saying CASA amplifies a child's voice, or CASA volunteers help a child's voice to be heard. A couple of other highlights from that. We honor, because the American culture has shifted to really recognize that families look different. And so instead of saying mother and father, we say parents, recognizing anybody can be a parent. And then the last thing I want to say as it relates to the messaging book is being people first when we describe a person. So instead of saying a disabled person, the language that we're encouraging across the network is a person with a disability, or instead of saying a foster child, it's a child in foster care. So really using people first language. So that's in the messaging book that we are sharing with others across the other stakeholders, just for that continuity. So people know what CASA volunteers are talking about, but hopefully encouraging that change in other professions within this arena as well. CASA has our collaborative family engagement, speaking of family, our collaborative family engagement initiative, which is in its 5th or 6th year now. We are currently in 70% of the programs, of the CASA programs in Texas. So that's 51 of our 72 members. The 72 members, as most of you know, serve 254 counties collectively. That 70% represents 110 counties. Our goal is to be in all counties by the end of fiscal year 2023. But of the 70%, we're working in 10 DFPS regions with 4 of the SSCCs. And we continue to work with CFE, and in fact, we're starting an ECFE, which is an early collaborative family engagement initiative, really working with children as soon as they enter the court system, as opposed to waiting the traditional length of time before starting the CFE process. Our normalcy guide that we're working on is going to be finished by the end of September. We're very much looking forward to having that out and available across the state. We have an initiative that we are piloting this year. It's called CASA Clergy and Community. We spent the last two years developing, working with the faith communities across the state and local CASA programs, really working on bridging the connection between the faith community and CASA volunteers. And we also work with Child Protective Services in that they already had an established faith initiative. And so we came alongside them to really work together to really build out this initiative. And so we're working, we have 3 pilots taking place this year. We've developed a toolkit that we'll be refining based on the outcome of the 3 pilot programs. And the last thing I want to talk about is CASA Acts. CASA Anti-Child Trafficking, or CASA Acts, because you cannot survive in this arena without a new acronym. But Texas CASA is in the network is committed to being informed partners and advocates in the anti-human trafficking work. So we are working to create resources. We've actually dedicated a staff member to create resources and provide training to our local CASA programs. And we currently offer an e-learning to help advocates better understand commercially sexually exploited children. And Dallas County actually developed that resource with the Saving Innocence Project. And we've got that resource on our website. We help refine that to allowing it to be a virtual training that anybody can access. And we're developing more tools and more resources for our local CASA programs. And I think I spoke as fast as I could, but I'm concluding my report. Thank you.
Thank you. We realize 3 minutes is, but some of these reports go longer, and they should go longer. So we appreciate, as always, your leadership and the collaboration between Texas CASA and the Children's Commission. Any questions for Vicki Spriggs? Comments? All right, well, thank you. It's always a very thorough report, and we truly appreciate you. I have Therese Stevenson from the Trevor Reese Foundation. Are you, Ms. Stevenson, are you here?
Yes, I am here. And so happy to be with you, because I just think always the opportunity to gather together and really talk about sort of all these current concerns and long-term hopes and wishes for our sector is just super important. So just admire everyone here's work and commitment. You know, what I really wanted to say is I'm not sure individually, each of you, you know, what kind of intersection or engagement you have with funders, the funder community. But I think you do know that, you know, in philanthropy, what we're really trying to do, and in terms of really engaging with the public sector particularly, is to look at, you know, how can we help incubate and innovate, improve and supplement services that really improve the well-being of the kids that we care so much about, and really look at where our funding gaps and funding and gaps in services that, you know, can really help improve the well-being of kids. So, you know, one of the things as a funder, we really do have our ear pretty closely to the ground. We love being with people and learning. And we really enjoy the closeness and partnership that we have with our grantee relationships. And through that, even though we don't have really direct engagement much with the kids that are being served, you know, through these relationships with providers and a lot of the collaborative members here, you know, we really do try to understand as best as possible the nuance and complexity of, you know, what the whole system, you know, needs to be healthy to really serve kids in the best way that we can. So, and actually yesterday I was on a call with a placing agency, and we do this very often, is just kind of catch up, and they were kind of updating us, you know, on what they're seeing related to the heightened monitoring and how they're trying to address, you know, with that issue, also trying to address capacity and help in any way that they could. So really what I wanted to mention today is Katie did mention the work that we're doing, particularly in Region 3 and of course across the state. And funders are really trying to stay attuned to, how can we help support, and make a more robust provider community and stakeholder community to really support success and what the state's trying to do. So I'm going to really be trying to work within our child welfare group to, communicate some of the things that seem to be important to what you guys are expressing in these meetings and what we're hearing, out in the community and, with parents too. So, a couple of things that we're really looking at most recently, and this really pertains to all kids and particularly the most vulnerable kids, but also kids in care, is what some people are calling sort of the fourth wave of the COVID pandemic. And two of the main concerns, I think that funders are really trying to prioritize right now that are sort of collateral damage from COVID, and particularly for kids in care, just this impact of sheltering, but on mental health and behavioral concerns particularly, but also on educational supports. So many of these kids are falling so far behind in their education that we really feel it's really critical to address and make sure that kids are getting the educational supports and really robust interventions they need to catch up, because as we know, kids in care, struggle educationally too, but also really trying to look at how we can support more social, emotional, and into real mental health disorder needs, for kids in care. So those are really two of the sort of highlights I think that the funder community, really realize right now we need to focus on. And then in addition, obviously, for the system itself, really be concerned about kids with high acuity related to those capacity and special services concerns that they need. So, just want to encourage you to, it sounds like as you're listening to cases, you're well aware of these concerns. And I think we're just all have sort of this common aspiration that kids are getting, the services and care that they need. So, but also, I'll be interested to kind of hear this as I go forward and sort of community with you is, looking at prevention concerns and just things that can really help sort of streamline and reduce the amount of time that kids intersect with the child protective system. So anyway, thanks. I really appreciate being with you guys.
Thank you. We also appreciate the work of the Reese Jones Foundation throughout the state and its impact on communities. So thank you, Therese, very much. Any questions for Therese Stevenson? Well, you heard her. She wants to hear from the stakeholder community. So please reach out as you go about your work in your respective communities. And so now we're very much on time and appreciate everyone's efforts. We have two judicial advisors, Sheila Craig, our equity advisor, and Justice Michael Massengale, our senior judicial advisor. And we begin with Sheila Craig, our equity advisor.
Good afternoon, and I'm really pleased to be able to be here today. I want to just share briefly with you a little bit about our equity work group. We're really excited that our group kicked off its first meeting on December 15th. We started with a really rich discussion and session from Tanya Rollins, our current and soon to be retired disproportionality manager, and I'm really sorry to hear that. But also from a number of judges, Judge Sakai, Judge Wheelis, Judge Martinez-Jones, who shared some insights on their experiences around addressing equity in their courts. We also heard from Judge Sheldon, and I heard him speak a little bit. I kind of came on as he was talking. And, part of that process was about really honoring the work that had been happening in the Children's Commission with judges from the beginning around focusing on equity and really looking through that kind of lens, examining data and highlighting the great work that had taken place for a number of years, and understanding that what we're doing is not a new thing, but it's really allowing that historical context to be a catalyst for what we do going forward. So for those judges who've been a part of the process in any way, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. Our next meeting was held on April 29th, and that meeting sort of came on the heels of a lot of public cases. One was the George Floyd case, and a number of other things that have happened in that have sort of been publicized in social media. And today, everybody's a news person, everybody has a camera. So there's so much information that's sort of being put out there. But we heard from our partners in this work group about, their experiences, their thoughts, their feelings about the what's been happening in terms of current events, and also understanding that all these things help to sort of frame what we do and how we do it going forward. I want to make one comment before I go on, because it was something that I kind of heard weaved into a couple of presentations from our commissioners, and that is the importance of language. I heard Vicki Spriggs talk about language, and a few others speak about language. And I want to say this and sort of put this thought in your head that, you all have probably heard the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And I want to present a different thinking around that sticks and stones may break our bones. However, words can shape our reality. And so I want you to think about that in terms of the importance of language, the language we use to create our mission, our vision, our values, the language we use to describe families and communities and the children and youth we serve, the language we use to think of as we go about our daily business, as we observe people who look differently from us, the language we use to shape our policies and practices, and how we analyze our data is really important. And it's very, very important to have feedback. I heard Therese talk about the importance of hearing from our constituents, from the families and children, not just who we serve, but who, if it were not for them and their circumstances, we wouldn't be here. And I think about that daily, that if it were not for the people that are served by my system, the children, the families, and the individuals who are dealing with multiple circumstances, I would not have this job. I would not be paid by the state. That puts me right at the center of what is going on within our systems and how our families and youth are being served. And it makes me accountable. While I didn't create the system and the way it operates, because I work and live in it, I have an accountability and a responsibility to do right by those we serve. So just wanted to put that out there. So going on, the discussion was really rich in our April meeting. We talked a lot, and we had a presentation by Jeff Cox around data. It was a really powerful, very in-depth, detailed data presentation that generated a lot of conversation. And while we know that in our courts, the data is collected very differently, a lot of the data around race may or may not be collected, or there's not consistency. But someone asked in a session I did on a different day, not with the Children's Commission, why is it important to even know that? That's uncomfortable for me to ask. And what we say is that while collecting data sort of categorizes people and that doesn't feel comfortable, that right now is the best way that we have to determine who we're serving, how we're serving them, and whether there is equity in the delivery of our services. And it also calls out who we're not serving and who we're not serving well. And so the data sort of puts that kind of information front and center and helps us to be accountable. So we are looking forward to analyzing the data book and the bench card and providing feedback and edits on those items and taking part in many other projects as it relates to really supporting judges and having the best and the most current information possible to do amazing jobs. And I would say, you know, having been involved with many of the judges and Justice Guzman and the staff at the commission for a number of years, it's really been an amazing journey. I know that we have a lot of work to do. We haven't arrived, but the beauty is that we are on this journey and we're on it together. And while it might be difficult and it might be a struggle, what I also say is that the people we serve struggled every day to deal with their life circumstances, with sometimes the challenges of decisions that are being made, that many of them have to be made, right, to create safety for children. However, they are struggling daily. And so if we're going to struggle a while, I say that's okay. That's okay to get to a better system and better outcomes. Also, I want to share that Judge Willis and Judge Martinez-Jones are going to be presenting at our neonatal abstinence syndrome conference. And I don't know if I said this, many of you all know me. I work for Health and Human Services. I am the director for substance intervention, prevention, and treatment programs. And what's important to me is that equity and data is weaved into everything we do. It is not what I do only, it's also who I am. So this is how I live my life in my community, in my family, and in my work I do every day. And so for that reason, my work is not just about the work group, but it's also about how I look at our system and how we're serving people, whether we're reaching everyone that we need to reach. And I also know that if we're not reaching populations of people who are struggling with substance use, then those people may very well get involved in the child welfare system. They may very well be coming before you all in the courts, and their lives and the trajectory of them and their families from generation to generation will be affected. So what I do now impacts what you do going forward. Also in line with that, we have started an equity series in behavioral health services where we're providing training to our staff to really develop a common language and understanding of what it means to achieve equity and how do we develop an equity lens. We are scrutinizing our data by race, ethnicity more and requiring our Office of Decision Support to provide more accurate and consistent data around race and ethnicity. We're also providing training to our providers, and there's over 300 of them. We're providing that training so that they are on the same page with us because they're the ones that are doing the direct service. We support them and those contracts, but they're the ones delivering services to the community. And we want that done in the most humane way. We're looking at our policies, our practices, and we're also looking at the way we provide technical assistance through that equity lens, ensuring that our providers are reaching people in the way that they should and providing services in the way they should. We also have another conference called the Institute, and we're hoping to have Judge Martinez-Jones and Judge Willis to also present at that conference. And if they can't, I might be reaching out to some of you all. So that, I believe, is my, oh no, one last thing. I also was able to share a little bit at the data work group with Dylan and the participants in that work group. And what I want to say is that data is only one part of the story. Data provides that concrete, the numbers, right, the facts. And for people who might struggle to say, well, is that data accurate? What I would say is that's the same data we use to fund our positions, to fund our programs and services. And so if it's accurate for those purposes, it's accurate for what we need in terms of addressing equity. But data is one part of the story. If we're not hearing from the people we serve and understanding what their experiences are in our systems, then we only have one perspective. And we need their perspective in order to do the best job possible. And so with that, Justice Guzman, I close.
Thank you, Sheila, for that report. And you did mention something that I think those of us who have been on the commission for many years are well aware of, and that is the commission's cognizance of equity and how we work and continue to work on equity in the child welfare system and our justice system. And we thank you. You've worked with us in different capacities, and so thank you for your continued work. Anyone else have a comment or anything? All right, then we will turn the floor over to our Senior Judicial Advisor, Justice Michael Massengale, who also works with the Access to Justice Commission. And I think we keep him on because he is a worker. And so we appreciate you, Justice Massengale.
It's good to see everybody. I was really interested in one of David Slayton's comments about sort of the next phase of anticipating and moving towards hybrid proceedings. Having had the experience of working both with the Children's Commission and now with Access to Justice Commission, I thought from the beginning of these pandemic challenges that getting judges accustomed to remote proceedings really has presents the opportunity to be a real game changer in improving access, whether it's in the child protection context and enabling judges to get better access to children and to families. And a great story we just heard from Judge Ferguson, and also in the access to justice realm, people for whom it may be a true hardship to take a day from work to appear in court for a 5-minute hearing. And I think what the state has done, all the judges in Texas have done to adapt and make use of technology has been really fascinating. One of the things that David Slayton's comment made me think I wanted to share with the judges in this meeting is that as you start to encounter the need for hybrid type proceedings, you might think about looking to the world of alternative dispute resolution, which is where I'm doing most of my work now, because not only are we going through the same sorts of challenges, conducting mediations and arbitrations under the same kinds of circumstances, but there's also a little bit of history that can be drawn on. So just to give you an example, in the field of international arbitration, there's been the need to conduct these types of not only virtual proceedings, but also hybrid proceedings, because you have so many logistical problems. You may have litigants from around the world, and there may be a disparity of resources where not everybody can bring their witnesses and their legal teams to be somewhere. And so they have developed protocols that have existed from before the pandemic with best practices on how to manage a proceeding where you have a component that's in person and another component that is happening virtually, particularly with an eye toward making sure that it's a fair proceeding and that people are not disadvantaged by having to participate remotely when others are participating in person. So I wanted to just let people know those types of resources exist and are out there, and I'd be happy to help connect anybody who's interested to them. I'll just throw out another example of something that we've been encountering in my practice that may relate to some of you who work in courthouses where there's multiple courts, and people are going to be doing in-person proceedings, virtual proceedings, and hybrid proceedings. Think about how you're going to wisely manage your resources. For example, oftentimes there's one big courtroom and then other smaller courtrooms. You don't want to put all of your technology for virtual or all of your best technology for virtual hearings in the big courtroom, because you may end up needing the big courtroom for in-person proceedings where you want to be able to keep people separated. And what this may mean is that you need to be sure you have access to technology for, say, just one person who needs to use the technology, but may need it for a one-day or multi-day hearing. And I'll be sure to get this message to David as well, but I just wanted to let everybody know that that a lot of other people have been wrestling with these challenges, and there's resources for them.
Thank you, Justice Massengale, for your report and for sharing the tip about looking to arbitration proceedings international. I think that would be helpful to some of us. And so with that, we have concluded the commissioner updates. Thank you everyone for your excellent updates. We have 2 collaborative council members that requested time to speak today, and we will be Sarah Worthington on behalf of Mary Christine Reed with the Texas Foster Youth Justice Project. Sarah, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours for a couple of minutes.
Hi, thank you so much. Like Justice Guzman said, my name is Sarah Worthington. I'm here for Mary Christine Reed, who's a part of the Collaborative Council. We work with the Texas Foster Youth Justice Project, which is a statewide project of Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. I just wanted to very briefly share some information about the relief that's available to young adults who have experienced foster care through the Supporting Foster Youth and Families Through the Pandemic Act. Patrick and Jamie already referenced this in their presentation. I'll be talking about a different part of Division X. And everything that I'm saying here is in our written materials in the meeting notebook as well. I just want to point out a few specific points of relief that's in Division X for young adults up to age 27. Those funds have to be used by September 30th. So there's a real sense of urgency about trying to connect young adults to those funds, especially those who are struggling. Some of the most notable provisions, I'll just briefly reference 4. Young adults who left foster care on or after January 27th, 2020 are allowed to stay in or return to foster care regardless of their age and regardless of whether they're working or in school. Basically, anyone who is aging out can't be forced to leave. Of course, things are complicated by the capacity issues that DFPS is experiencing right now, but I can't speak to that. The Pandemic Act also expands ETV benefits. It limits barriers for accessing ETV and increases funding that's available. Additional Chafee funds are also available for, quote, critical needs that can include a large range of like housing costs, bills, food, things that young adults may need to survive. And those funds are allowed to be spent on youth who experienced foster care at age 14 or older, not only youth who aged out of care. There are also specific funds that are permitted to be used to help youth and young adults get their driver's license. And those funds can be spent on things like car insurance, practice lessons, and even help to purchase a car. Funds are limited at $4,000 per youth or young adult, but that funding is there. And as I'm sure y'all know, our project provides free legal assistance to youth and adults who have experienced foster care. And we are working really hard right now to make sure that young adults who might be eligible for this relief can access that relief to the fullest extent permitted by the Act. Including those youth who may not have aged out of care, but experienced foster care at age 14 or older. We're seeing that there's some access issues there that we're working and advocating for. So please feel free to reach out to me, to Mary Christine. Our contact information is included in our written update. And also feel free to refer youth to us. Our hotline and contact information is also in our written update. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's important information, and we hope that you'll share it in your communities as well. And thank you for including your contact information in your update.
Thank you.
So we all have it. Thank you. And now we'll hear from Barbara Elias Percival with Texas Lawyers for Children.
Thank you. First, I want to start by commending Jocelyn Fowler and all of you judges who spoke at the Judicial Trauma Institute. It was just absolutely fantastic. And so many important, innovative ideas were shared that if you miss seeing that, I highly recommend watching the videos. And the importance of sharing ideas is what I want to talk about, because there were so, as we try to move the system to one that is more trauma informed, people are trying new things and experimenting and coming up with new ideas. And so many of you judges, as you share your commissioner updates, have such fabulous ideas, that innovative practices you're doing in your court, not only about trauma, but normalcy and human trafficking and teen pregnancy. And just imagine if everybody in the state would know about and do what you're doing in your court that's working. And so in our online legal resource and communication center, the reason it's also called Communication Center is that we have private and very secure communication tools for judges and for attorneys separately. So you're only communicating with your professional colleagues. And we've built the system so that no attorney, even in our office, can access the judicial communication tools. I can't get into them. And so we have a judicial moderator for them. Judge Rob Hoffman is graciously serving as our judicial moderator, so he can let us know if something is going wrong and not working, so we can pass that on to our software developer. So we have email networks, and there are different email networks for you. There is one called, all the email networks are called Colleague Connection, and there's one that's simply called Colleague Connection Judicial, and that is for all the judges handling child protection cases across the state. So you can ask each other questions and share ideas. And judges have reported to me that if they ask a question, then within minutes, others jump in and answer, and they get so much help and new ideas and information. There's one for child protection courts, but we want all the substantive discussions to happen in the main judicial Colleague Connection. So the child protection court one is just for logistical things and things that only the child protection courts need to know about. There's one for drug court judges. There's one for judges handling juvenile justice cases. And I want to tell you that for all the innovative ideas you're doing that you want to memorialize and share, you know, if you're doing something great in your court and somebody hears about it and they call you, and then you've got, 10 people to call back that week to explain what you're doing in your court. If you just took a few minutes to post it in our discussion board for judges, there's one for innovative practices and pilot projects, and there's one for trauma-informed care and services, so that you can talk about and post permanently what you're doing in your court. We have document vaults, so you can post the documents. When you talk about sharing documents across the state, you can put them in here, and hundreds of other judges will be able to access them. No attorneys will be able to access them. If you spoke today about innovative things you're doing in your courtroom, and if you spoke at the Judicial Trauma Institute, I urge you to please go to the discussion boards and post what you said or some brief synopsis of what you're doing, and make that information available. Instead of just influencing the children and families in your court, you could be doing that to hundreds if you'll use these communication tools. On pages 57 and 58 of the commission meeting notebook are instructions about how to access our online center, how to access the email networks and sign up for them, how to get into the discussion boards. And I think when you see the document vaults, that's very self-explanatory. So I hope you will share your great ideas. You've got fabulous ideas, and the Judicial Trauma Institute had fabulous ideas. So please share them, and let's transform the whole state by all working together to make that happen. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara, for reminding us that we should share the wonderful knowledge that we acquire through our own work and through these meetings. The final commission meeting will be on September 17th, 2021. I expect that to be live. The meeting place will be made available to you. We're not sure yet, but we're working on that. And the timing will hopefully start right about the same time, 9:30. As always, thank you all so much for being here and the incredible participation. I'm glad it's on YouTube, because honestly, I do think this was an incredibly productive meeting with some great ideas and stories, and really just helpful to the bar and the public about what's going on in the field, in their courtrooms. Thank you again. I hope you have an amazing weekend. Please reach out if we can do anything for you. It's been my honor to preside over the meeting. We are adjourned. Thank you.